The courtroom was filled with the sharp clack of heels on marble floors, the murmur of voices low and cautious. A high-profile case had drawn the eyes of the public, eager to see the fate of the tech billionaire whose name was almost as ubiquitous as the companies he ran. But today, this courtroom, where the world's biggest names in business and law converged, had a different feel. Tension hung in the air like a storm cloud ready to burst. Elon Musk stood at the center of the drama, his piercing eyes scanning the room with an air of quiet confidence. His usual playful smile was absent, replaced by a look that matched the gravity of the situation. He was no stranger to public scrutiny, but this was different. The case was personal, and the judge, Judge Martin Hayes, had made it clear from the very beginning that this wouldn't be an easy ride. Judge Hayes was a man of power and prestige. Known for his sharp wit and stern demeanor, he had made his name in the courtroom by taking down some of the country's wealthiest and most powerful figures. But in this case, his sharpness seemed to take on a more cutting edge. As Musk stood at the podium, awaiting his turn to speak, Hayes smirked from behind his bench. It was clear, this wasn't going to be a typical case. The charges Musk faced were complicated, stemming from a recent scandal surrounding one of his companies. There were accusations of negligence, consumer deception, and even environmental hazards linked to a new venture Musk had launched. The public was already divided. Some rallied behind Musk, idolizing him as a modern-day inventor and visionary. Others, however, saw him as a reckless billionaire who was more focused on self-promotion than social responsibility. "You've built a world-changing empire, Mr. Musk," Judge Hayes began, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "But let's see if your inventions are as foolproof as you seem to think. How many failed experiments do you think the public is willing to forgive?" A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Musk didn't flinch. Instead, he stood tall, his fingers lightly tapping the sides of the podium in a rhythmic, almost meditative fashion. His calmness only seemed to fuel the judge's mockery. Hayes leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "You've made headlines, Mr. Musk, not just for your technology, but for your colorful personal life. How do you think the court should view a man whose ventures are as unpredictable as his Twitter feed?" Elon's face remained an impassive mask. He wasn't one to engage in childish back and forths, but Hayes had crossed a line. The world had already judged him for his unconventional ways, but now, here, in this room, he wasn't about to let this judge add fuel to the fire. "I'm here to address the facts," Elon finally spoke, his voice steady, yet firm. "Not to entertain ridicule." The words hung in the air for a moment. There was a pause as the tension mounted. The judge's eyes flickered with a mix of amusement and irritation. "Oh, Mr. Musk," Judge Hayes replied with a mock sigh. "Always the man of few words, huh? But let's not pretend you don't thrive on attention. You love the spotlight, don't you? This whole courtroom is just another stage for you. Just another place to show off your, well, everything." Musk's eyes narrowed, but he didn't take the bait. Instead, he simply leaned slightly forward, his voice cutting through the judge's snide remarks like a blade. "If you're going to judge me, judge the work, not the spectacle." The words struck a chord in the room. Musk had faced public mockery before, on Twitter, at press conferences, even in interviews. But this was something different. In that courtroom, with the judge mocking him to his face, it felt as though the very fabric of his reputation was at risk. And yet, he was oddly calm. This was just another challenge in a lifetime of obstacles, and Elon Musk, if anything, was accustomed to that. Hayes smirked. "Judge the work, huh? Fine. Let's get to it. The question remains, Mr. Musk. Do you really think you can talk your way out of this one?" Elon didn't respond immediately. He stood still, his eyes focused ahead. It wasn't that he couldn't defend himself. He had the facts, the evidence, and the lawyers to back him up. What bothered him was the personal tone of the judge's remarks. This wasn't about the case. It was about discrediting him as a person, a tactic he wasn't going to let stand. "Your Honor," Elon finally spoke again, "let's stick to the facts. You can make all the jokes you want, but at the end of the day, the truth remains. If we're going to do this, let's do it on the merit of the work." The courtroom fell into a hushed silence. For a moment, even the judge seemed taken aback. He had expected a fiery response, something to get the crowd going. But Musk's cool, collected demeanor left him with little ammunition. For a brief second, the power in the room shifted. Musk had called the judge's bluff. It was clear that, beneath the jabs, the courtroom was no longer just about Musk's companies or his personal life. The real issue was power. Who held it, who could wield it, and how it would define the outcome of this trial. Before Hayes could respond, a sharp voice from the gallery interrupted. "Objection, Your Honor," the defense attorney called out. "This is getting personal. Can we please focus on the case?" Judge Hayes glanced at the defense attorney, then at Musk, his expression shifting from amusement to a more guarded one. "Sustained," he said sharply. "Let's proceed with the evidence." But the damage had already been done. The room was alive with whispers, and for the first time since the case began, the people present weren't sure what to expect next. Musk had made his point, and it was clear the judge wasn't entirely in control anymore. As the tension built, a quiet unease settled over the courtroom. Elon Musk had just flipped the script, and the judge, though still in control of the proceedings, was starting to lose his grip on the situation. Everyone in the room, including the judge himself, realized that this wasn't going to be the easy win they had expected. This battle was far from over. For the first time, the world would see Elon Musk not as a billionaire tech mogul, but as a man fighting for something much deeper: his legacy. The courtroom drama had just begun, and what happened next would shape the future of Musk's career, his companies, and perhaps even the public's perception of who he truly was. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The room was still charged with the aftermath of Elon Musk's confrontation in the courtroom. The sharp air of tension seemed to cling to everything in that moment, but as the trial resumed, it became clear that what had just happened was more than just a clash of personalities. It was the tip of the iceberg, a glimpse into a much larger journey. For all of Elon Musk's success, there was a deeper story, a life filled with challenges, ambitions, and sacrifices that most people didn't see. Today, as the case continued, the world would get a closer look at the man behind the empire. Elon Musk had always been a figure that stirred strong emotions. To some, he was a hero, a visionary who dared to dream bigger than anyone else. To others, he was an arrogant billionaire, obsessed with his own grandeur, a person whose success seemed more about luck and timing than anything else. But the truth was far more complicated. Beneath the headlines and the internet memes, there was a person with a history that shaped every decision he made, every move he took in his companies, and every challenge he overcame. Born in Pretoria, South Africa, in 1971, Elon's early life was anything but ordinary. His parents, Errol Musk, a wealthy engineer, and May Musk, a dietitian and model, were both intelligent, driven, and ambitious people, but their marriage was anything but stable. Elon's childhood was marked by a sense of isolation, especially as his parents eventually separated when he was just a boy. The emotional scars from this early upheaval would later manifest in his drive to prove himself, not just to the world, but to himself. School was not easy for Elon either. He was often bullied, his introverted nature and sharp intellect making him an outcast. Yet, it was during these formative years that Elon's love for technology and science began to bloom. He would often retreat into books, teaching himself about computers, engineering, and physics, subjects that fascinated him. His parents, despite their own struggles, encouraged his intellectual pursuits, recognizing his potential before anyone else did. When Elon was 17, he made the bold decision to leave South Africa and move to Canada, seeking new opportunities. The decision wasn't just about escaping his circumstances. It was driven by his desire to break away from the limitations of his environment. He saw America, his ultimate destination, as the land of endless possibilities. Elon's journey to the United States wasn't the result of some grand plan, but rather a natural step in the pursuit of his dreams. His determination to make it on his own, against all odds, was something that would define his entire career. At Queen's University in Canada, Musk studied economics and physics before transferring to the University of Pennsylvania in the United States. There, he pursued dual degrees in economics and physics, preparing for a life of invention and entrepreneurship. But even then, success wasn't guaranteed. Elon had to work hard to make his mark. It wasn't until he dropped out of Stanford University's PhD program just 2 days after enrolling that his true journey began. In the mid-1990s, the internet was still in its infancy, and the possibilities seemed endless. Elon seized the moment by founding Zip2, a city guide software company that provided maps and business directories for newspapers. It was a risky move, but it paid off. After selling Zip2 for nearly $300 million, Elon found himself with more money than he had ever imagined, and an even bigger drive to continue changing the world. From Zip2, Musk moved on to create X.com, which would later become PayPal, revolutionizing the way people conducted financial transactions online. PayPal was a massive success, and it was the company's sale to eBay for $1.5 billion that truly launched Musk into the public spotlight. With the money from the sale, he didn't stop. He had bigger dreams, ones that involved space exploration, electric cars, and sustainable energy. Tesla and SpaceX, his next two ventures, would come to define his legacy, but not without their own struggles. Tesla, a company that would ultimately change the automotive industry, faced near collapse in its early days. Musk poured every penny of his own fortune into Tesla, all while trying to keep SpaceX afloat. There were moments where it seemed like both companies would fail. But Elon Musk, ever the visionary, pushed through those challenges with a relentless focus on his goals. His willingness to take risks, often at the expense of his personal life, was part of what made him both admired and criticized. In the midst of these monumental achievements, Musk's personal life was equally eventful. He had been married and divorced twice, and his relationships with his children, especially with his ex-wife Tallulah Riley, were often subject to public scrutiny. Yet, despite the headlines and the paparazzi, Elon kept his focus on what he believed mattered most, pushing the boundaries of what was possible. But it wasn't just his professional journey that defined him, it was his mindset. Elon Musk wasn't afraid to challenge the status quo. He had an almost unshakable belief in his own abilities and a deep, almost obsessive drive to make the world a better place, even if it meant pushing people away. He was often criticized for his unorthodox approach to leadership, his disregard for tradition, his willingness to make bold and often controversial decisions, and his tendency to be more focused on the bigger picture than the immediate consequences of his actions. And yet, here he was, in this courtroom, fighting for more than just his reputation. The charges against him were serious, but to Elon, they represented a much larger battle. One for his legacy, for the future of his companies, and for the world he believed could be transformed by innovation. In this moment, it wasn't just about the accusations. It was about proving that his vision was worth fighting for, even if the fight was happening in a courtroom. But as the trial wore on, it became clear that the tension between Musk and Judge Hayes was no longer just about legal strategy. There was a personal element to it now. Hayes, the judge who had mocked Musk's achievements, had his own reasons for the disdain. The world would soon learn that this trial wasn't just about Musk's business dealings. It was about the clash of two powerful, ambitious men who had something to prove. In a way, the courtroom drama was the perfect stage for Elon Musk to demonstrate his resilience and vision. For all his flaws, his eccentricities, and his controversies, he was a man who had been shaped by his past, by the struggles, the triumphs, and the relentless pursuit of something greater than himself. And in the coming chapters, as the trial continued, that legacy would be put to the test like never before. As Elon sat back in his chair, ready for the next round of the trial, he reflected on how far he had come. This was just another battle. The real fight was about shaping the future. And for Musk, that was a fight worth every sacrifice. The following days in court were anything but ordinary. The media frenzy surrounding the trial reached a fever pitch, with cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions, and spectators eager to see the next chapter in the saga unfold. Every word spoken in that courtroom, every move made by Elon Musk or Judge Hayes, seemed to carry with it a weight far beyond the charges at hand. It was as if this trial, in some strange way, was shaping the future itself. Judge Hayes seemed to relish the public attention he was getting from this case. His sharp tongue and biting remarks toward Musk became almost routine, drawing in the crowd and giving the courtroom a spectacle-like atmosphere. His behavior, however, was beginning to push the limits of professionalism. As the trial moved forward, the tension between him and Musk grew more pronounced. Musk's usual calm demeanor was becoming strained, though he did his best to maintain composure. But it was clear that he wasn't about to let Hayes, or anyone, tarnish his reputation without a fight. The day after the dramatic exchange in court, Musk's legal team met in private. His lead attorney, Claire Montgomery, a no-nonsense lawyer with a track record of high-stakes cases, had already begun preparing a more aggressive defense strategy. "We need to shift the narrative," she said, flipping through the case files on the table. "It's clear that Hayes is turning this trial into a personal vendetta. We can't let that happen. We need to focus on the facts, the innovation, the progress, the larger picture." Elon listened, his mind sharp and focused. He wasn't just a businessman. He was a visionary. The charges against him, though serious, were nothing compared to the monumental efforts he had put into creating a new future for humanity. Tesla's electric cars, SpaceX's rockets, and his plans for colonizing Mars weren't just dreams. They were tangible, real projects that had already changed the world in significant ways. But as Claire continued, Elon knew she was right. The court wasn't about innovation. It was about perception. If they didn't act quickly, Hayes could twist the narrative into one that was personal, where the focus would shift from Musk's accomplishments to his perceived flaws. "We need to turn Hayes' own words back on him," Claire added, tapping her pen against the table. "If he wants to make this a battle of egos, we'll show him just how much bigger the stakes are. We fight for progress, for the future." That's a message that resonates. Elon nodded, his mind already racing through the possibilities. Claire had a point. If Hayes wanted to make this personal, Musk would make it a fight for something far greater than just his reputation. He would show the world that this wasn't just about a billionaire facing legal troubles. It was about the very future of innovation, technology, and humanity itself. And for Musk, that was a battle worth fighting. The next day in court, things took a darker turn. Judge Hayes, clearly aware of Musk's rising public support, seemed more determined than ever to belittle the man standing before him. With each passing hour, his tone became more mocking, his jabs more personal. "You know, Mr. Musk," Hayes said with a smirk, "I've seen a lot of so-called geniuses come through this courtroom, but you're different. You have this flair for drama, almost like you think you're some kind of hero." Elon's jaw tightened. He didn't respond immediately. The courtroom fell silent, the air thick with anticipation. Then, slowly, Elon stood up, his eyes locking with the judge's. "Drama?" Elon repeated, his voice calm but laced with an edge. "What's dramatic, Judge, is watching someone with so much potential wasted on mockery instead of addressing real issues." The words hit hard. Musk wasn't the type to engage in personal attacks, but the judge had crossed a line. He wasn't just challenging Musk's work, he was attacking his very character. And Musk wasn't going to let that slide. Hayes' face reddened, but he quickly regained his composure. "Let's keep it civil, Mr. Musk," he retorted, his voice dripping with condescension. "We're here to deal with facts, not your little crusade for the next great American novel." There was a moment of silence in the courtroom as the tension reached its peak. But Musk, his eyes unwavering, wasn't backing down. "I'm not here for stories, Judge," Elon said, his voice steady but firm. "I'm here to answer for the future of technology, for the promise of a better world. If you can't see that, then I feel sorry for you." The words hung in the air, and for the first time since the trial began, there was an undeniable shift in the room. The people in the courtroom, who had been quick to judge Musk's arrogance, were now beginning to see him in a different light. This wasn't just a legal battle. This was a battle for something much larger than any one person. This was a fight for the future of innovation itself. Judge Hayes, clearly flustered, tried to regain control. "Mr. Musk, this is a court of law, not a platform for your soapbox speeches. You're not here to lecture me or anyone else. Stick to the facts." But Elon's words had already done their damage. His defense team could feel the shift, too. They knew it wasn't just about the legal strategy anymore. It was about the perception of Musk himself. The more Hayes tried to undermine Musk, the more the public began to see him as the underdog, a man trying to bring about change in a world that wasn't ready for it. As the day ended and the courtroom emptied, the media buzzed with speculation. Musk had made his point, but the battle wasn't over yet. There would be more rounds, more arguments, more revelations. And each step of the way, the conflict between Musk and Judge Hayes would escalate. For Elon Musk, this was no longer just about defending himself. It was about proving that the future was worth fighting for. And he wasn't going to let anyone, not even a judge with a vendetta, stand in the way of that fight. It was in the midst of escalating tensions, during the fourth week of the trial, that Elon Musk and his legal team realized they were standing at a crossroads. The case had moved far beyond a simple business dispute. It was evolving into a public spectacle, a clash between two larger-than-life forces, one in a courtroom, the other outside it. What began as a fight to clear his name had grown into something Musk had not anticipated. A battle for his vision, his future, and the future of the technologies he had worked tirelessly to create. Elon had prepared for this trial in his own way. He'd faced far tougher challenges in his career, launching SpaceX when no one believed a private company could make it to Mars, or keeping Tesla afloat when it seemed on the verge of collapse. He'd navigated the volatile and often unforgiving world of Silicon Valley, where billionaires were made and broken with the flick of a pen. Yet, this felt different. The courtroom wasn't just a place for legal arguments. It was a battleground where the very essence of his work was under siege. That evening, as the courtroom doors swung closed, Elon sat in the back of the conference room at his legal team's headquarters. His mind was racing. The tension from the trial weighed heavily on his shoulders, but it was something else that kept him up at night. The persistent thought that his life's work, the very future he envisioned, was being distorted by the public spectacle the trial had become. It wasn't just the judge's increasingly personal remarks that were fueling the fire. It was the media's portrayal of him as a controversial figure, someone to be either admired or ridiculed, but rarely understood. His team was discussing the next steps. Claire Montgomery, the lead attorney, was talking strategy. "We need to shift the focus back to the facts. Back to what you've built," she said. "We can't allow Hayes to make this about your personality. We need to show the court and the world that your work is bigger than any individual. It's about progress, innovation, and pushing the boundaries of what's possible." Elon leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled in thought. He could feel the weight of their words, but the truth was that he didn't just need to win this case. He needed to set a precedent, to make sure that what he was fighting for was clear. It wasn't just about proving he was innocent. It was about showing that the future of technology, of humanity itself, was on the line. He turned to Claire. "What if we stopped reacting to Hayes? What if we used this to our advantage?" Claire looked at him, intrigued. "Explain." Elon stood up, walking to the window, looking out at the city skyline. "Hayes thinks he's mocking me. But what if, instead of letting him define the narrative, we take the narrative into our own hands? What if we show the world that this trial isn't about some personal vendetta? It's about a fight for the future?" Claire's eyes narrowed as she considered the idea. "You're suggesting we make the trial about something bigger than you? Something bigger than this case?" "Exactly," Elon said, turning to face her. "This is a fight for innovation. For electric cars, space travel, sustainable energy. It's about building a future that no one thought was possible. And Hayes? He's just one man trying to stand in the way of progress." Claire smiled. "That's the kind of message that could turn this whole thing around." The following morning, Elon did something unexpected. He took the stand. His legal team had been hesitant to put him on the stand, knowing that the prosecution would try to twist his words and discredit him. But Elon wasn't just any witness. He wasn't going to sit there and simply defend himself. He had a story to tell, one that needed to be heard. As he walked into the courtroom, all eyes were on him. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation. The media, the spectators, the court officers, all waiting to hear what Musk would say. The mocking tone of Judge Hayes still lingered in the air, but now Musk was ready to flip the script. The room fell silent as Elon took the witness stand. His eyes briefly met the judge's, but there was no fear in them, only determination. "Mr. Musk," the prosecutor began, clearly eager to dig into his character. "You've made a lot of claims about your businesses, claims of revolutionizing industries, changing the world. But how do you respond to the allegations that your actions have been reckless, that you've misled investors, that you've used your company's names as a platform to promote your own ego? Elon didn't flinch. He took a deep breath and leaned forward slightly, his voice steady but carrying the weight of someone who knew what was at stake. Let me tell you about recklessness, he began. Recklessness is believing that humanity can't make it to Mars. Recklessness is thinking that electric cars are just a passing trend. Recklessness is ignoring the environmental devastation that's happening every single day while we continue to burn fossil fuels. What I'm doing may seem unconventional to some, but it's about doing what others think is impossible. There was a brief pause in the courtroom, a ripple of murmurs passing through the audience. The prosecutor was momentarily thrown off balance, but he quickly recovered. You're claiming that your actions are for the greater good, but how do you reconcile that with the accusations that you've jeopardized the financial futures of your investors? The prosecutor pressed. Elon stood his ground. It's not easy to change the world. If you want to make a real difference, you have to be willing to take risks, big risks. And sometimes, those risks come with challenges. But I'm not in this to protect my wealth or my reputation. I'm in this to make sure that the world doesn't wait another 100 years for clean energy. I'm in this to make sure that we go to Mars, not just to survive, but to thrive. As Elon spoke, there was a shift in the courtroom. His words, though blunt and unapologetic, carried an undeniable force. He wasn't here to defend a personal vendetta or justify his ego. He was here to fight for something greater, the future. Judge Hayes, who had been listening with increasing irritation, spoke up. Mr. Musk, while I appreciate your enthusiasm, this court is not a platform for your futuristic speeches. We are here to discuss legal matters, not your personal crusades. Elon met Hayes' gaze, unflinching. I disagree, Judge. This court is a place where truth should be revealed. And the truth is, we are at a crossroads. The future of humanity is being decided right now. And if we don't change our course, we're headed toward destruction. But if we do, if we push forward with innovation, with renewable energy, with space exploration, then maybe we stand a chance. The room was silent, the tension palpable. For the first time in the entire trial, it wasn't just Musk defending himself. It was Musk making a statement, one that would echo far beyond this courtroom. And in that moment, Elon Musk knew that his journey had taken a dramatic turn. This wasn't just about winning a case. It was about securing the future, his future, and the world's. The tension in the courtroom was palpable the following day. The air was thick with anticipation, and the world outside seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what would unfold next. Elon Musk had taken a bold step in his testimony, making his case not just about clearing his name, but about something much larger, the future of humanity. His words had resonated deeply, but now the stakes were higher than ever. Judge Hayes, though clearly frustrated by Musk's defiant stance, had a long history of bending the rules when it suited him. Yet, in the days following Musk's emotional declaration, the dynamic in the courtroom began to shift. The public's perception of the trial, once focused solely on the drama and spectacle, now started to reflect the substance of what Musk was really saying. The media was picking up on his words, his message of hope and progress, and they were spreading it like wildfire. In the courtroom, though, the real battle was still being fought. The judge was no longer just a neutral figure presiding over the case. His personal disdain for Musk had become painfully obvious. As much as he tried to remain professional, his comments had become increasingly biting. But it wasn't Hayes who would change the course of the trial. It was something far more unexpected. That fateful morning, a piece of evidence that had been long buried in the depths of Musk's defense team's archives was brought to the surface. This wasn't just any evidence. It was the key that could turn everything around. It was a USSS, United States Secret Service, badge, one that Elon had kept in his possession for years, a gift from a former president after a high-profile security threat. Musk had never revealed it before, but his team, in a final push to reveal a side of him the public hadn't seen, decided to make it part of their defense. The courtroom fell into stunned silence when the badge was presented. It wasn't just a symbol of the protection he had received. It was a representation of the trust placed in him by the highest levels of government. In the midst of this high-stakes legal battle, It became clear that Musk wasn't just a businessman. He was a person of consequence, someone whose influence reached far beyond the boardroom and into the very heart of national security. Elon looked calm as he stood in the witness box, the badge in his hand. It glinted under the harsh courtroom lights, its significance unmistakable. As he held it up for the jury and the judge to see, a wave of realization seemed to sweep over the room. This, Elon said, his voice steady and unyielding, is a reminder of the responsibility I carry, not just for the companies I've built, but for the future of our country and our planet. The badge was a powerful symbol. In that moment, the courtroom's atmosphere shifted again. It was no longer just a legal battle. It had become something much bigger. Musk wasn't just defending his right to build companies and make money. He was defending his right to make a difference. And the world now saw that he was doing so at a personal cost, shouldering a weight few could understand. Judge Hayes, visibly rattled, glanced at the badge, his jaw tightening. Musk's words were cutting through his defenses. The idea of Musk as a visionary, a man of national and global importance, was hard to ignore. It wasn't just a simple courtroom drama anymore. The truth had been laid bare. Elon Musk was more than a businessman or a controversial figure. He was a catalyst for change. And now, that truth was inescapable. As the defense rested its case, the energy in the room shifted. For the first time since the trial began, Musk's team had successfully reframed the narrative. The accusations against him were no longer about the trivialities of personal misconduct. They were about a larger fight, a fight for the future. And Musk had just proven that he was willing to risk everything to win that fight. But it wasn't just the judge or the jury that needed convincing. The media, the spectators, and the public at large were watching, waiting to see how the judge would react. And when the judge responded, it wasn't with the usual snark or condescension. Instead, his words were surprisingly measured. "Mr. Musk," Hayes said, his voice softer than before, "I have to admit, I underestimated the scope of your involvement in this matter. Perhaps this court has been too focused on individual actions and not enough on the broader impact. Your presence here today speaks to a greater responsibility. I can't ignore that." The words hung in the air, heavy with significance. For the first time in the entire trial, it seemed like Hayes was beginning to see Musk not just as a man to be mocked, but as a person of consequence. Elon didn't allow himself to relax, though. This wasn't over. It couldn't be. He knew that the emotional climax of the trial had been reached, but the resolution was still to come. His message had gotten through, but now he needed to finish what he had started. In the hours that followed, as the trial recessed for a brief break, Musk stepped out into the hallway, his mind spinning. For the first time since the beginning of the case, he allowed himself a moment of peace. His legal team gathered around him, offering quick updates, but they could sense the shift in his demeanor. The fight wasn't just about winning anymore. It was about something much bigger, something that transcended this courtroom in this case. Elon wasn't just fighting for his freedom or his legacy. He was fighting for the future of humanity, for the next generation, for the next great leap forward. As the trial resumed, Musk returned to the stand. His mind was sharp, his resolve stronger than ever. It was no longer about defending himself. It was about proving that the risks, the sacrifices, the visions he held had a higher purpose. "Judge Hayes," Elon began, his voice steady, "I want to remind this court of something. Progress isn't easy. It's never been easy. It's messy, it's painful, and it challenges the status quo. But without it, we stagnate. And if we stagnate, we risk losing everything we've fought for." The words echoed in the courtroom as the crowd leaned forward, captivated. In that moment, it was clear. Elon Musk had just taken control of the trial in a way no one could have predicted. He wasn't just defending himself. He was making his final stand, and the world was watching. The trial had reached a fever pitch. The energy in the courtroom was electric as the final day of proceedings arrived. The last few weeks had been a roller coaster of emotions, revelations, and twists. Elon Musk had taken risks, both personally and professionally, and the entire world had watched him face adversity with unyielding resolve. But now, the moment of truth was upon him, the culmination of everything he had fought for. The courtroom was packed, with the press filling the gallery and the world beyond the doors waiting for the verdict. It had become more than just a legal battle. It was a reflection of the changing tides in society, where tech giants like Musk held the reins to the future, and the court system was now forced to confront the complexity of their influence. Elon sat at the defense table, his expression calm, but his mind racing. He had poured everything into this trial, his beliefs, his passions, and his vision for the future. He wasn't just defending himself against accusations. He was defending the very idea of progress, the belief that humanity's potential was limitless if only they dared to dream big. The courtroom was no longer just a place for legal arguments. It was the battleground for a clash of ideologies. And today, the battle would come to an end. Judge Hayes entered the room with an air of authority. The room went silent as the judge took his seat, his gaze sweeping over the courtroom. There was an almost palpable shift in the atmosphere, as if the entire world had paused for this moment. The final decision, the verdict that would determine Musk's fate, was about to be delivered. Mr. Musk, we've heard your testimony. We've seen the evidence. We've felt the weight of your words, Judge Hayes began. I must admit, this case has been a challenge, not just legally, but philosophically. The issues you've raised about progress, innovation, and the future are not ones that can be easily dismissed. And so, after careful consideration of all the facts and arguments presented before this court, I have reached my decision. The room was so quiet that you could hear a pin drop. The eyes of the media, the spectators, and even the opposing counsel were all fixed on the judge, waiting for the words that would change everything. Mr. Musk, Hayes continued, his voice firm yet measured, while I do not condone certain actions that have occurred during the course of this case, I cannot ignore the larger truth that you have presented. You have made a compelling case not only for your actions, but for the future that you are building. And while this court cannot endorse every aspect of your methods, it is clear that your contribution to society, to technology, and to the future of our planet cannot be understated. Elon's heart raced, but he didn't flinch. This wasn't a victory for his ego. It was a victory for the ideals he had spent his life fighting for. This was the moment where the world would finally see that his vision wasn't just a dream. It was a movement, one that could not be silenced. Hayes paused for a moment, as if to let the gravity of his words sink in. Then, with a final, decisive gesture, he declared, "Therefore, I rule in favor of Mr. Musk. The charges against him are dismissed, and he is free to continue his work." The court acknowledges his contributions to innovation and recognizes the importance of his work in shaping the future. A collective breath was exhaled. It was as if the entire courtroom had been holding its breath for weeks, and now, the tension had finally been released. Musk's legal team erupted in applause, though Elon remained calm. He nodded at them, his eyes focused, but his mind still processing the weight of what had just occurred. The press, outside the courtroom, exploded with excitement as the news spread. Headlines flashed across screens. Musk wins. Court rules in favor of tech mogul's vision for the future. Judge Hayes acknowledges Musk's role in shaping tomorrow's world. For the first time in a long while, Elon Musk wasn't just a controversial figure in the public eye. He was seen as a pioneer, a visionary who had proven that the future of humanity depended on bold ideas and the willingness to take risks. But even in the wake of the courtroom victory, Elon knew that this was just the beginning. His work had only just begun. The ruling in his favor was a symbolic triumph, but the real battle was in the innovation he would continue to champion, in the risks he would continue to take for the sake of humanity's future. Later that evening, as Elon stood outside the courthouse with his legal team, he reflected on the journey that had led him here. It had been grueling, filled with uncertainty and public scrutiny, but it had also reaffirmed his belief in the power of resilience and the importance of pushing forward despite the odds. As the sun set over the horizon, Elon spoke to his team with quiet resolve. This trial, it's not just about winning. It's about showing people that they can make a difference, that they can challenge the status quo. We did that today. Claire Montgomery, his lead attorney, smiled, proud of their hard-fought victory. You've set a new standard, Elon. You've shown the world that it's possible to fight for what you believe in and come out on top. Elon nodded thoughtfully. It's not about the win for me, Claire. It's about showing the world that innovation is worth fighting for, and that, no matter the odds, we can make a better future. As the group began to disperse, Elon stood for a moment, looking out at the city. There was still so much work to do, so many projects to continue, so many boundaries to push. But for the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of peace. He had faced the storm and emerged stronger, not just as a businessman or tech mogul, but as a symbol of the fight for progress, for change, and for the future. The courtroom drama was over, but the real journey was just beginning. The courtroom was empty, but the world outside was alive with buzz. The moment the verdict had been announced, the atmosphere had shifted entirely. No one could deny that this trial had been about more than just legal wrangling. It had been a battle for ideas, a clash of two vastly different worldviews. And Elon Musk, against all odds, had emerged victorious. News outlets across the globe exploded with coverage. The media was split. Some praised Musk for his resilience and vision, while others criticized his methods, claiming that his success was built on a foundation of questionable ethics. Still, there was no denying the fact that he had won. But the victory didn't feel as sweet as one might imagine. Musk was never one to rest on his laurels. For him, winning a legal battle wasn't the finish line. It was just a momentary pause before diving back into the work that mattered most. As he stepped out of the courthouse, flanked by his legal team and supporters, Musk was hit with a wave of flashing cameras and shouting reporters. They were hungry for answers, eager to hear from the man who had just reshaped his image in front of the world. Elon, what's next for you? Will this victory change the way you approach your businesses? Elon, how do you respond to those who say your tactics were unethical? Is this the beginning of something bigger? The questions came fast and furious, and Musk took them in stride, his expression calm and composed. He had been in the public eye long enough to know how to handle the media, but today felt different. It wasn't about answering questions just to appease the press. It was about sending a message. I've always believed that the future is about innovation, pushing boundaries, and taking risks. This trial wasn't just about me. It was about what's possible when we don't let fear or the status quo hold us back. There's a lot more work to do. The future isn't guaranteed, but I'm committed to doing whatever it takes to help us get there. His words resonated with some, while others questioned his motives. The media frenzy surrounding the trial was inevitable. Musk was once again the focal point of a global conversation, his every move scrutinized. But he didn't mind. The headlines might change, but his mission remained the same. The court had cleared his name, but the work ahead was still monumental. As he walked through the throngs of reporters, Elon couldn't help but reflect on everything that had brought him to this point. The sleepless nights, the mounting pressure, the overwhelming public opinion. It had all led to this moment of vindication, but there was still a nagging feeling deep inside. The fight for progress, for the future, was far from over. Later that evening, as Elon sat in his office overlooking the city, his thoughts were a whirlwind. His team had already begun strategizing their next moves. New projects, new ventures, new ways to change the world. But as much as his mind raced with ideas, he couldn't ignore the broader implications of what had just happened. The trial wasn't just a personal battle. It was a turning point for an entire generation. A generation that was beginning to question the old rules, challenge established systems, and redefine what success looked like. His phone buzzed. It was a message from Claire Montgomery, his lead attorney, who had been by his side throughout the trial. You did it. The world is watching. But remember, this is just the beginning. The real fight is still ahead. Stay focused. We have a lot to do. Elon smiled softly. He had no intention of slowing down. The victory in the courtroom wasn't just a personal win. It was a signal to the world that nothing would stand in the way of progress. Whether people agreed with his methods or not, they couldn't deny the impact he had made. That night, as he prepared for his next challenge, Elon Musk knew one thing for sure. This was only the beginning. The world had changed, and he would continue to push forward, relentlessly chasing the future. Whether it was through space exploration, sustainable energy, or the next big technological breakthrough, he was going to keep moving forward, no matter what. The courtroom drama was over, but the legacy of the trial would linger. In the coming weeks, The media would continue to scrutinize every decision, every move Musk made. But he was ready for it. The real question now was not whether he would continue to challenge the system, but how far he was willing to go to reshape it. And with that thought in mind, he turned his attention to the next big project, the one that would define the next chapter of his life. Because for Elon Musk, the journey was never about the destination. It was about the relentless pursuit of the future. Elon sat at the helm of his conference table, the room filled with his most trusted team members. The verdict had been a resounding success, but Elon Musk was never the kind of man to bask in the glory for long. His mind, always several steps ahead, was already focused on what came next. He was no longer just defending his work. He was going to change the world. He glanced around at the faces around him. His engineers, designers, and business strategists were all eager for direction. The battle in the courtroom was won, but now came the far more daunting task, to fulfill the promise of that victory. "We have the momentum," Elon said, his voice steady but resolute. "Now we need to make sure we use it." Claire Montgomery, still by his side after the trial, leaned forward with a look of determination in her eyes. "The legal victory has given you a platform, Elon. The world is listening. But what matters now is what we do next. We need to act fast and strategically." Elon nodded, considering her words. "We've been focused on Mars, space exploration, and electric cars, but we need to expand our scope. It's not just about creating products anymore. It's about shaping the future of humanity." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. Everyone in that room understood the magnitude of what Elon was proposing. He wasn't just building companies. He was creating legacies. And he wasn't going to stop until every aspect of life on Earth and beyond was transformed. "We've set a high bar," Elon continued, "but it's not enough to innovate. We have to do it at scale. We need to bring sustainability to the forefront of every industry, from transportation to energy to artificial intelligence." As the team brainstormed, the vision began to expand, taking on a life of its own. They would build cities on Mars, create a self-sustaining economy, and reduce humanity's dependency on fossil fuels. The stakes had never been higher, and Elon wasn't interested in playing it safe. The real challenge wasn't in achieving these goals. It was in ensuring that others believed it was possible. Musk knew that the court ruling had validated his work, but now it was time to face new opposition. The vision he had for the future would attract both supporters and detractors. The media, ever hungry for controversy, would continue to scrutinize every move he made. But Elon was unfazed. This was just the beginning. Later that week, Elon traveled to Washington, D.C. to meet with lawmakers. If he was going to change the future, he knew he couldn't do it alone. The government's support would be essential, especially if he wanted to build the infrastructure necessary for the ambitious projects he had in mind. But convincing lawmakers was no easy task. For someone like Musk, a man whose reputation was tied to ambitious, boundary-pushing ideas, the political landscape posed a different set of challenges. Sitting across the table from a group of senators, Elon presented his vision. "We are at a turning point in history," he said, leaning forward with intensity. "We have the opportunity to change the way we live, the way we power our world, and the way we interact with space. But we need your support to make it happen." The senators exchanged wary glances. Musk had been a controversial figure in the past, and many of them were hesitant to align themselves with his bold plans. But Elon had a way of communicating that went beyond the typical political rhetoric. He didn't just talk about the future. He painted it in vivid detail. The cities on Mars, the colonies that would help humanity survive beyond Earth, the transition to renewable energy, these weren't pipe dreams. He spoke with conviction and a deep belief that these were not just technological advancements, but necessary steps for the survival of humanity. "You're talking about billions of dollars in investment," one senator said. "This isn't something we can take lightly. We need to know that your vision is achievable and that it will benefit the American people." Elon didn't hesitate. "I understand the gravity of the situation, but what's the alternative? The world is changing, and we have to either lead the charge or risk falling behind. This isn't about creating a few jobs or making a profit. This is about securing the future of the planet." He paused, letting his words sink in. "And we can't do it without your support." If we're going to build the sustainable, interconnected future that I envision, we need to think long-term. The government's involvement is crucial. The senators exchanged more glances, but there was something in Musk's words that resonated with them. Maybe it was his unwavering confidence, or perhaps it was the undeniable logic of his argument. Either way, the conversation shifted. By the end of the meeting, Elon had managed to secure several commitments from key lawmakers, a small but vital victory in his quest to reshape the future. Back in California, Musk's companies began to mobilize. SpaceX was preparing for the next phase of its Mars mission, while Tesla focused on creating sustainable energy solutions. Neuralink, too, was moving forward with its research on brain-computer interfaces, a technology that Musk believed would change the way humans interacted with technology. The resources were flowing in, and the pressure to deliver was mounting. But it wasn't just the physical infrastructure that needed to be built. Musk understood that to truly change the world, the mindset of society had to shift. People needed to believe in the possibility of a future where technology, innovation, and sustainability were not just buzzwords, but tangible realities. To achieve this, Musk began to ramp up his efforts to communicate directly with the public. He started appearing more frequently in interviews, podcasts, and live events. He even began producing a series of documentaries detailing his company's work, giving the public a behind-the-scenes look at the groundbreaking technologies being developed. Elon knew that for all the media hype, the real battle was in changing the hearts and minds of everyday people. They needed to understand that these innovations weren't just for the rich and powerful, they were for everyone. The future he was building wasn't just about Musk and his companies. It was about creating a better world for everyone. As the months passed, the world began to take notice. Elon Musk's vision, once seen as outlandish and unrealistic, was beginning to take shape. The first successful missions to Mars were being planned, and Tesla's electric cars were becoming a common sight on the streets. People were starting to believe in the possibility of a world that operated on clean energy, and Musk was becoming not just a tech mogul, but a symbol of hope for a better, more sustainable future. But even with all the success, Musk knew that the fight was far from over. The road ahead would be filled with obstacles, financial, political, and technological. But if there was one thing Elon Musk had learned throughout his career, it was that no challenge was too great. The world needed bold ideas and leaders who weren't afraid to fight for them. And he was just getting started. Despite Elon Musk's groundbreaking success, not everyone was on board with his vision. While many hailed him as a revolutionary, others viewed him as a disruptor. A man whose ambition often crossed ethical boundaries in the pursuit of progress. The media, after all, wasn't always kind to those who dared to challenge the status quo, and Musk was no exception. As his companies moved forward with ambitious plans, there was increasing skepticism in certain circles. Environmental groups, some political factions, and even some of Musk's own fans began to voice concerns about the potential consequences of his grand designs. The race to colonize Mars was met with criticism from environmentalists who argued that Earth's problems needed to be solved before humanity left the planet. The rise of electric vehicles was seen as a partial solution, but many wondered if it was enough to combat the environmental crises Musk claimed to address. Why are we focusing on Mars when our oceans are drowning in plastic and our cities are choked with pollution? One popular environmentalist group tweeted. Musk's obsession with space seems like a distraction. While the comment didn't slow Musk's momentum, it did highlight the mounting resistance he was facing. Critics questioned his priorities, accusing him of using environmentalism as a marketing tool for his companies rather than genuinely working to save the planet. Then there were the political critics. Elon had always walked a fine line when it came to political involvement. He had been a vocal supporter of free market principles and was often at odds with government regulations. While he advocated for the freedom of private companies to innovate without excessive government oversight, many in the political sphere saw this as self-interest. The public and media were beginning to question whether Musk's ventures were genuinely in the public's best interest or just a way to line his pockets. Back in his office, Musk sat at his desk, staring at the latest headlines plastered across his screen. Musk's Mars fantasy, a distraction from Earth's crises? Elon Musk's space ambitions, is it just corporate greed in disguise? The backlash was clear, and it was growing louder by the day. For a moment, he allowed himself to sink into the weight of it all. There were times when the sheer volume of criticism felt suffocating. But then, like a flicker of light breaking through a stormy sky, a familiar feeling washed over him: determination. He had been here before. When he founded Tesla, many said it would never work. When he launched SpaceX, people laughed at the idea of a private company sending rockets to space. He knew that to create true change, he would always face resistance. But it didn't make the criticism sting any less. As Elon scrolled through his emails, his phone buzzed. It was a text from Claire Montgomery. "Elon, we need to address the growing concerns. Your public image is being questioned. We need a strategy to show the world that what you're doing is for the betterment of humanity, not just personal gain." Elon let out a sigh. He knew she was right. The public backlash was building, and it wasn't going to stop on its own. He had to act quickly, but he also had to be careful. How could he manage the growing opposition without jeopardizing the progress his companies were making? That evening, after hours of strategizing with his team, Elon made a decision. He would take the criticism head-on. Rather than shy away from the controversy, he would address it directly. He would lay out a clear, transparent vision for the future and explain, in his own words, why he was pursuing these lofty goals. The following day, Elon appeared on a live broadcast to address the mounting backlash. The world was watching, and he knew it. The moment had arrived. The live interview was set in a small, intimate studio with minimal production. Just Elon, the interviewer, and a handful of camera operators. The simplicity of the setup was deliberate. He didn't need theatrics to make his point. He was here to speak plainly, without distractions. The interviewer, a well-known journalist who had been both critical and supportive of Musk in the past, opened the conversation. "Elon, thank you for joining us today. There's been a lot of discussion surrounding your recent projects, especially the Mars missions and the criticism that you've been more focused on space than on solving the issues here on Earth. How do you respond to that?" Elon leaned forward, his eyes unwavering. "Let me be clear. Everything I do is driven by one core belief. Humanity's future depends on our ability to innovate, to think beyond the limitations of the world we know. Climate change, pollution, and other issues are not problems we can ignore, and I'm not trying to avoid them. In fact, every project I work on, whether it's Tesla, SpaceX, or even Neuralink, is designed to push us toward a better, more sustainable future." He paused for a moment, allowing his words to sink in. "We're already addressing climate change with electric vehicles and renewable energy, but let's be real. The scale of the problem is huge, and we need bold action. But solving Earth's problems isn't enough. We must also ensure that humanity has a backup plan. Mars isn't just a fantasy. It's a way to ensure the survival of the human race if something catastrophic happens to Earth." The interviewer nodded but pressed on. "But isn't it risky? Isn't it irresponsible to put so much money and effort into a venture like Mars when there are so many problems here at home?" Elon smiled, a glint of determination in his eyes. "I get it. People are scared. And that's okay. We all want a safe, comfortable life here on Earth. But if we don't take risks now, if we don't aim high, we risk stagnation. I've always believed that when we push boundaries, when we take on the hardest challenges, we spark innovation in ways we can't even imagine. And that innovation will help us solve the problems here at home." He leaned back slightly. "I know it's a lot to ask, but we can't afford to limit our thinking to what seems possible. We have to build a future that's bigger than what we see today. And that's exactly what I intend to do." The interview concluded, and for the first time in weeks, Elon felt a sense of clarity. He had addressed the concerns head-on, and while the backlash wouldn't disappear overnight, he had made his stance clear. The world would judge him, just as it always had, but that wouldn't stop him from pushing forward. As he walked out of the studio, his phone buzzed again. Another message from Claire. "Well done. We'll need to keep the momentum going, but you've given the world something to think about. Now let's move forward." And forward, Elon Musk would go. No matter the opposition, no matter the challenges. Because for him, the future wasn't just an option. It was an imperative. As the weeks passed since the interview, Elon Musk felt a growing sense of relief. The media frenzy had subsided, but the battle for public perception was far from over. The resistance was still there, and even though his message had resonated with many, others remained deeply skeptical. There were politicians, environmentalists, and even former allies who continued to question the long-term impact of his endeavors. It wasn't just about proving his vision was viable. It was about building trust in an era where skepticism ran high and everything was under a magnifying glass. This required a new strategy, a fresh approach, but it would also require an unexpected ally. It came in the form of someone Elon never expected, someone who had once been a vocal critic of him and whose alliance could completely shift the public narrative. The man who called himself the protector of the environment, Senator Daniel Green. Senator Green had spent the better part of his career championing environmental causes. He had even publicly denounced Elon Musk's ventures, particularly SpaceX, as impractical and selfish, accusing Musk of using the cover of saving the planet to justify his corporate empire. But now, everything was different. Elon was in his office when the call came in. "Mr. Musk," the voice on the other end of the phone said, "this is Senator Green. I'd like to meet with you. We need to talk." A few days later, Elon and Claire Montgomery found themselves sitting in a conference room across from the senator. Senator Green, dressed in his usual business attire, looked more serious than usual, his brow furrowed in thought as he gazed out the window. The sunlight streaming into the room caught the edge of his sharp features, giving him an almost cinematic presence. "Senator, thank you for taking the time," Elon said, cutting straight to the point. "I'm not sure what's changed, but if you've come here to give me a piece of your mind again, I'd prefer to save us both the trouble." Green's lips twitched slightly, but his expression remained serious. "I think you've misunderstood, Mr. Musk," he said. "I didn't come here to lecture you. I came because I see something different now. Maybe I was too quick to judge." Elon raised an eyebrow. This was not the confrontation he expected. Green continued, leaning forward slightly. "You've always been a lightning rod for controversy. People either love you or hate you. But the more I've been reading about your ventures, especially your work with Tesla and SpaceX, the more I realize you're not just some rich guy trying to make money off a fantasy. You're building something bigger than any one of us." Claire glanced at Elon, who seemed somewhat taken aback by the senator's shift in tone. "So, what exactly are you proposing, Senator?" Claire asked, her voice cautious. Green sighed, clearly conflicted. "I want to help you. I want to help get your message across. The world needs bold ideas, but you can't keep going it alone. You're seen as a symbol of everything that's wrong with corporate America, and no amount of flashy press conferences or interviews is going to change that. You need credibility, and you need the kind of support that only comes from true, long-standing political alliances." Elon was quiet for a moment, contemplating the offer. He had never imagined himself working with someone like Senator Green, especially considering the senator's history of criticizing him. But then again, this was a new kind of world they were living in, one where even enemies could become allies if the cause was right. "Let me get this straight," Elon said, his voice slow but deliberate. "You want to back my projects, not because you think I'm right, but because you believe in the greater good?" Green nodded. "Exactly. Your Mars plan. It's audacious. But the way I see it, it's about more than just the pursuit of space. It's about inspiring people to think beyond their narrow concerns and focus on something bigger than themselves. Your companies are not just pushing boundaries, they're redefining them. If we align our goals, I think we can turn this into something the entire country can rally behind." Elon leaned back in his chair, processing Green's words. He wasn't used to working with politicians, but perhaps this was the turning point he needed. The public was skeptical, but a partnership with someone like Green, someone who had the ear of the masses, could bring the legitimacy and trust that Elon's vision needed. "I think we have a lot to talk about," Elon said, his voice tinged with a sense of optimism. "But if we're going to do this, we need to be upfront with the American people. We need to let them know what this partnership means and what it can do for the future." Green smiled, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "Agreed. Transparency is key. But I have no doubt that together, we can make a real difference." The news of this unexpected alliance spread like wildfire. The media, always quick to jump on any shift in the narrative, jumped all over the story. Politicians from both sides began to weigh in, with some applauding the partnership and others questioning it. Environmentalists were skeptical, but they couldn't ignore the fact that Musk's projects, particularly his work with electric vehicles and renewable energy, were already making strides in the right direction. But for Elon, this alliance was more than just a PR move. It was a signal that the tide was changing. By aligning with a figure like Green, who had previously been one of his harshest critics, Musk was not only legitimizing his efforts in the eyes of the public, but also building a bridge that could span the divides that had always existed between the private and public sectors. The road ahead would be rocky, but for the first time in a long while, Elon Musk felt that he had the support he needed. It was a rare moment of unity, and one that could change the entire trajectory of his ventures. The press conference announcing the partnership was scheduled for the following week, and both Elon and Green were preparing for the moment that would change everything. Together, they would present a unified front, one that embraced not only Musk's ambitious projects but also a new path forward for sustainable innovation. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? As the days passed, Elon Musk and Senator Daniel Green's partnership began to gain traction. The media buzzed with anticipation, and analysts debated whether this new alliance would truly bring about the change they both promised. The press conference was set, and the stakes couldn't have been higher. For Musk, this was more than just another PR event. It was a defining moment for the future of his companies, his vision, and his reputation. But with this new partnership came consequences, ones Musk hadn't fully anticipated. The press conference was held in Washington, D.C., at a grand, historical venue that symbolized the gravity of the announcement. Reporters from all over the world gathered, their cameras poised and ready to capture every word, every gesture, every detail of the moment. For Musk, it felt like a delicate balancing act. He had always been more comfortable in the tech world than in the political arena. But today, he had to face not just the cameras, but a room full of political power brokers and media figures whose views on him had been largely negative for years. Senator Green stood at his side, his calm demeanor contrasting with Musk's palpable energy. Green had been a master at navigating these types of environments, and he knew that their success depended on this moment, on showing the world that their partnership was more than just a political maneuver. It had to look authentic. When the conference finally began, the room fell into an almost reverent silence. The journalists eagerly leaned forward in their seats, their eyes fixed on the stage where Musk and Green were standing. Green took the microphone first. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here. We are here today because we believe in the future. A future where technology, sustainability, and innovation are not just buzzwords, but the guiding principles for tomorrow's world. Today, I stand with Elon Musk, not just because he's a brilliant entrepreneur, but because he's committed to something bigger than himself, a future for humanity. And together, we are pledging to create a sustainable and prosperous future." The senator paused, looking around the room as the reporters scribbled down notes. "The collaboration between my office and Mr. Musk's companies is about more than just progress. It's about ensuring that we don't lose sight of our shared responsibility to Earth. Yes, we are striving for a future on Mars, but we are equally dedicated to making Earth a better place through clean energy, responsible innovation, and addressing the very real challenges we face." Musk stepped forward, his signature intensity taking over as he began to speak. "I've always believed that we can change the world, that we can make it better for future generations. But to do that, we need bold thinking, collaboration, and action. What we're announcing today is more than just a partnership between two men. It's a partnership between the public sector and the private sector, between the people of America and the innovators of tomorrow. We have the opportunity to not just tackle climate change, but to lead the world in sustainability. And I'm proud to be working alongside Senator Green to make that vision a reality." The audience was silent for a moment, processing the weight of what Musk had just said. He'd rarely been so direct, and certainly never in a political setting. The alliance had shifted from a business partnership to a statement of public intent. For the first time, Musk was presenting himself not just as an entrepreneur, but as someone who could drive policy and influence real change on a national scale. But the press conference wasn't without its tension. As the questions began, the atmosphere shifted. The first reporter stood up, her voice sharp as she pointed to Elon Musk. "Mr. Musk, Given your history of controversial statements and your take-no-prisoners attitude, how do you plan to reconcile your public persona with the political goals you're now aligning yourself with? Will this alliance result in more corporate handouts, or is this truly about helping the public? Musk didn't flinch. He had anticipated the question. He'd been preparing for this moment for years. "I'm not here for handouts," he replied, his voice calm but firm. "I'm here to make a difference. The goal is not to take from the public, but to give. I believe that technology and innovation can be harnessed to create new industries, provide jobs, and reduce our reliance on fossil fuels. This isn't about making money for myself. This is about creating a future where we can all thrive." Another reporter stood up. "Senator Green, you've been a vocal critic of Musk's ventures in the past, particularly regarding his focus on space exploration. What changed? Why are you suddenly supporting him?" Green didn't hesitate. "I've always believed that we can't be narrow in our thinking. For years, I argued that we needed to focus on solving the problems here on Earth. But what I've come to realize is that these problems can be solved through innovation, through the very kind of work that Musk has been doing for years. Whether it's through sustainable energy or space exploration, the fact remains that we need big thinkers, and Elon is one of the best. I'm here because I believe this partnership can create real, meaningful change." But as the questions kept coming, the room grew more polarized. On one side were those who still viewed Musk as a reckless visionary, while others began to see him as a leader. Some reporters pressed Green on his sudden change of heart, suggesting political motivations behind his support for Musk. The tension in the room mounted, and Elon could feel the weight of the scrutiny pressing in on him. Despite the tension, the press conference ended without any major disasters. The media would likely continue to debate the implications of the partnership, but both Musk and Green knew that the real work was just beginning. The storm was only starting to brew, but they had taken the first step toward changing the conversation. In the days that followed, the political storm intensified. Critics from all sides began to weigh in, some accusing the senator of selling out, others questioning Musk's intentions. Environmental groups were divided, with some hailing the partnership as a necessary step forward, while others feared it was a dangerous collaboration that could give Musk even more power and influence. But amidst the criticism, there were those who saw potential in what Musk and Green were trying to do. Progressive thinkers, environmental activists, and business leaders all weighed in, hoping that the alliance would result in meaningful policy changes and real-world applications of Musk's innovations. In a private meeting a week after the press conference, Musk sat down with Green again. The senator leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "You knew it wasn't going to be easy," Green said, a hint of amusement in his voice. "But the real test starts now. How do we turn this into action?" Elon nodded. "We've got the attention we need. Now, we have to prove it. We need to align the right people, secure the necessary support, and build the policies that will help us move forward. It's not just about Mars. It's about making Earth a better place for the people who live here now." The road ahead would be a difficult one. The political storm had only just begun, and Elon Musk knew it would take everything he had to weather the fallout. But for the first time in a long while, he felt confident that he wasn't alone. The tides were shifting, and the battle for the future was far from over. Despite the growing public support for the Musk-Green alliance, the undercurrent of resistance was undeniable. As both Elon Musk and Senator Daniel Green began to garner praise from supporters, an equally powerful and silent opposition began to mobilize behind closed doors. These opponents, though not as vocal as the media critics, were determined to see this alliance fail. Elon had always known that his vision wasn't for everyone. In fact, the higher he reached, the more adversaries he seemed to attract. But this was different. The resistance he was now facing was organized, strategic, and far more calculated than he had ever anticipated. It wasn't just the environmental groups or corporate rivals that Musk had to worry about. It was a network of powerful political figures, influential media moguls, and deep-pocketed interest groups that saw this new alliance as a threat to their own agendas. Elon was sitting in his office at SpaceX headquarters one late afternoon, going over the latest reports on public opinion when Claire Montgomery entered, her face grim. She had an envelope in her hand, one that she placed carefully on the desk in front of him. "What is it?" Elon asked, his voice tense. Claire glanced at the envelope before meeting Elon's gaze. It's from an anonymous source. We've got a problem. She slid the envelope across the desk, and Elon opened it cautiously, pulling out a series of printed documents. His eyes scanned the contents, and his frown deepened. The documents contained highly detailed information about the recent press conference and the Musk-Green alliance. Everything from private conversations between Musk and Green to classified government memos that linked certain political figures to corporate lobbying groups. These people knew we were going public with the partnership, Elon said, his voice filled with disbelief. They've been tracking us from the start. Claire nodded. Exactly. And it's not just any group, Elon. These are high-level operatives who have influence in both the political and corporate spheres. They've been quietly working against your plans for years. This alliance between you and Green has made them nervous. They can't afford to let you succeed. Elon leaned back in his chair, processing the situation. He had always known that the higher he aimed, the more enemies he would make. But this felt different. This wasn't just opposition. This was a well-orchestrated campaign designed to undermine everything he had built. We can't let this slide, Elon said, determination rising in his chest. We need to know who's behind this, and we need to act fast. Claire nodded again, already pulling up information on her tablet. I've started tracing the connections. There's a coordinated effort to discredit the partnership, to paint you as someone who's just using Green to push a corporate agenda. They're playing the long game. They'll wait for a slip-up, for anything that can derail the momentum we've built. Elon's mind raced, considering his next steps. He knew that exposing these figures too quickly could result in a backlash, but doing nothing wasn't an option either. The alliance was fragile, and if it were to be torn apart by whispers and misinformation, all their work would be for nothing. We need to find out who's pulling the strings, Elon said, his voice resolute, and we need to make it public. In the days that followed, Elon and Claire worked relentlessly behind the scenes to track down the individuals responsible for the opposition. What they discovered was both shocking and unsettling. One of the key players in the effort to undermine the Musk-Green partnership was none other than former Secretary of Energy, Victoria Hayes. A well-respected figure in the political world, Hayes had always championed clean energy, but her definition of clean was deeply tied to traditional methods, such as nuclear energy and massive fossil fuel companies transitioning to carbon capture. The idea of a private billionaire like Elon Musk pushing for a world-changing, yet risky, vision of clean energy and space exploration was anathema to everything Hayes stood for. Through a network of powerful political donors, Hayes had quietly funded smear campaigns against Musk's ventures, positioning him as a reckless billionaire willing to risk everything for his personal gain. She had a team of media contacts, researchers, and even lobbyists at her disposal, all working tirelessly to undermine the credibility of Musk and his newly formed alliance with Green. It wasn't just Hayes, though. Elon's team also uncovered ties between several high-profile media moguls and corporate giants, all of whom stood to lose something if Musk's plans succeeded. Whether it was a rival tech company, an energy conglomerate, or a political faction that stood to lose power from the success of Musk's eco-driven ventures, it was clear that this was a multifaceted effort. The realization hit Musk hard. These were the same people who had supported his early ventures, but had now turned against him because of his rapidly expanding influence. The idea of a self-made entrepreneur challenging the established systems had always been a threat, but now it was more than just an ideological threat. It was a real challenge to the way things were done. Claire could sense Elon's frustration as he paced around his office. This isn't just about politics, she said, breaking the silence. This is about control. They're scared of what you're doing. They don't want to give up the power they've held for so long. Elon stopped pacing and turned to face her. I get it, but I won't back down. They can smear me all they want, but the truth will win out in the end. The following day, a report was released in the media. It was a direct hit to Elon's reputation, accusing him of exploiting government contracts, engaging in corporate collusion, and manipulating the public through media campaigns. The timing was impeccable. It came just as Musk and Green were preparing to unveil a new sustainability initiative. It wasn't just an attack. It was a well-crafted message, one that aimed to unravel the very foundation of Musk's credibility. And the public response was immediate. Critics pounced on the allegations, calling for investigations and demanding transparency. The media buzzed with skepticism, and the political storm Musk and Green had been trying to weather now threatened to turn into a full-blown hurricane. Elon knew that this was the moment of truth. The opposition was playing dirty, but he had no intention of letting them win. With his usual resolve, he picked up the phone to call Senator Green. "It's time," Musk said, his voice firm. "We need to take the gloves off." The battle had only just begun. With the forces working against him growing stronger, Elon Musk knew that the future of his endeavors rested not only on his ability to push forward with his vision, but also on his capacity to expose the shadows lurking behind the scenes. The game was about to change. But who would emerge victorious in this battle for control? The political storm was intensifying, but Elon Musk wasn't one to be easily deterred. His resolve to fight back against the covert opposition became stronger with each new challenge that emerged. But the smear campaign against him was not going to disappear on its own. In order to clear his name, he needed to take decisive action, and he needed to act fast. Senator Daniel Green had been by his side through the most challenging moments, but now they both faced the same harsh reality. They were in the crosshairs of a system designed to keep power within the hands of a few. Musk had faced backlash before, but this was different. His latest partnership with Green had drawn the attention of some of the most influential and well-funded opponents he'd ever encountered. Still, he wasn't ready to back down. He wasn't a man who retreated when the going got tough. He was a man who thrived in adversity. And this time, he was going to take the fight straight to the opposition. Elon met with his core team in a high-security room deep within SpaceX's headquarters. The room, which had been designed for top-level strategy meetings, felt tense. He could see the worry on the faces of his trusted colleagues, Claire Montgomery and Alex Fisher. Claire was frantically flipping through a series of files, her expression one of determination and anxiety. "We need to act now," Claire said, pushing a stack of documents across the table. "The more we let this drag on, the more damage they do to our credibility. We can't just sit back and wait for things to settle down. If we don't counter this attack, we risk losing everything." Elon nodded, scanning through the documents. They were filled with detailed reports on the smear campaign. Every accusation, every fabricated connection, and every piece of misinformation that had been published in the media. But what struck him most was the pattern they had uncovered. It wasn't just random. It was organized, and it was deliberate. Alex Fisher, the head of Musk's legal team, stood up, pacing as he spoke. "We've identified key players behind this campaign, and it's more than just Victoria Hayes. There are high-level lobbyists, PR firms, and even corporate execs who are coordinating this attack. But they're hiding in the shadows, making it difficult to trace who's really pulling the strings." Elon sat back, a glint of understanding in his eyes. "We need to expose them. Not just the people on the surface, but the puppet masters behind it all." Claire raised an eyebrow. "How exactly do you propose we do that?" Elon smiled, the familiar spark of determination returning to his face. "We go on the offensive. We fight fire with fire. We expose their networks, their connections, and their lies. We need to make them afraid of the truth getting out. And we'll do it by using the very tools they've used against us: media, public records, and powerful allies." It was a risky move, but it was the only move Musk felt he had left. He was no stranger to controversy, but this time, he was going to make the opposition fight to keep their secrets hidden. Over the next few days, Elon's team worked around the clock. Claire led the charge, gathering information from sources within government agencies, regulatory bodies, and even whistleblowers who had access to private communications. The more they dug, the more they found. They discovered that some of the people leading the smear campaign had ties to major corporations, some of which had stakes in traditional energy markets. These corporations stood to lose billions if Musk's push for sustainable energy and space exploration succeeded. More damning, they found evidence that these companies had been secretly funding the anti-Musk narratives through backdoor donations to political PACs, media outlets, and lobbying groups. But there was one breakthrough that stood out above all the rest. It came in the form of an encrypted email that Claire received late one night. The subject line was simple: "For Musk?" Inside the email was a series of documents, some of which were heavily redacted, but the key piece of information was undeniable. The documents linked Victoria Hayes to a clandestine meeting with executives from several energy giants, where they discussed ways to prevent Musk's projects from succeeding. The meeting took place only weeks before Musk's partnership with Green was made public, and the documents even referenced a plan to discredit him by any means necessary. The smoking gun was right in front of them. The opposition wasn't just political, it was corporate warfare on a grand scale. Elon's heart raced as he read the email. This was the moment they'd been waiting for. The evidence was there, and it was irrefutable. "We've got them," he said, his voice steady but filled with a new sense of purpose. "This is the breakthrough we needed." The next step was clear. They needed to go public with this information, but they couldn't do it alone. Elon knew that to have any hope of surviving this battle, he would need to bring in allies who could lend their support and credibility. He called Senator Green, his voice urgent as he briefed him on the findings. "It's time to expose the truth, Daniel. We have the evidence, but we need your help. This isn't just about me anymore. It's about the future of clean energy, sustainability, and fairness in the political system." Green listened intently, his voice calm but resolute. "I'll help in any way I can, Elon. This goes beyond partisanship. We have to stand together on this. I'll make sure the right people in Congress get this information. We can't let them get away with this." The battle lines were drawn. With the smoking gun in hand, Musk and Green had one chance to turn the tide of public opinion. They needed to get the story out before the opposition could bury it. Using their combined networks, Musk and Green took the information directly to the media. But they didn't just send it to one outlet. They made sure it was disseminated through multiple channels. Investigative journalists, political bloggers, and media personalities who had previously been hostile to Musk's initiatives were now being given the truth. The story was too big to ignore. As the news began to spread, the reaction was swift. The media, once filled with skepticism and suspicion about Musk, now had to reckon with the reality of the situation. The public began to question the motivations behind the attacks on Musk's character and the power structures behind them. Corporate giants and political figures who had once been untouchable were now under the spotlight, their secrets exposed. For the first time in months, Elon Musk felt like he was in control again. The truth had been laid bare for the world to see. But the opposition wasn't finished yet. They were already regrouping, trying to salvage what they could from the wreckage. But Elon had taken the first step toward dismantling their carefully constructed facade. The fight was far from over. But in this moment, Musk had achieved something significant. He had forced the enemy into the open, and now it was a matter of who would stand firm and who would fall. The news that had exploded across the media the previous week had not only shaken the foundation of the opposition, but had also thrown them into a state of desperate disarray. For the first time in years, Elon Musk had forced his adversaries to confront the reality of their own hidden agendas. The public, once deeply skeptical of his motivations, now had to grapple with the truth. The smear campaigns, the backroom deals, the covert attempts to derail Musk's vision, everything was exposed. But if there was one thing Elon Musk had learned over the years, it was that his enemies were never to be underestimated. While the media buzzed with revelations about corporate malfeasance and political corruption, the powers working against him weren't going to sit idly by and let the game end there. They would strike back, and when they did, they would use every tool in their arsenal to regain control. In the days following the public release of the documents, Musk's team had been inundated with messages of support. Investors who had once hesitated to get behind his ambitious projects were now calling, eager to reaffirm their commitment. Political allies who had once been too cautious to align with him publicly were offering their endorsement. Even some media outlets, previously hostile, began to show a more balanced view of Musk's intentions. But amidst the positive noise, Elon could feel the storm gathering. It wasn't just the corporate giants like those backing Victoria Hayes that he needed to worry about. The political figures who had secretly worked against him, those who had their own motives to protect, were circling, preparing their own counterattack. Elon's phone rang one evening, breaking his focus as he reviewed a set of new plans for his renewable energy ventures. He picked it up, recognizing the number immediately. It was Senator Green. "Elon," Green's voice was grave. "I need to warn you. They're not backing down. If anything, they're gearing up for something bigger. We've just learned that a new wave of negative ads is already in the works. They've got more resources than we realize. Elon's grip on the phone tightened. I knew this wasn't over. What's the next play? Green let out a sigh. They're going after your character again. But this time, they're more subtle. They're planting doubt about your integrity, questioning the true motives behind your projects. They're going to try to isolate you. Make it seem like you're just using your public image to mask your true intentions. Elon stood up, pacing in his office. The idea of another media campaign aimed at tearing him down didn't surprise him, but it didn't make it any easier to swallow. I won't let them win. This time, we need to be ready for everything they throw at us. The next day, Musk's team began to receive reports of a growing wave of negative publicity. A series of well-crafted opinion pieces began to surface across respected news outlets, each one subtly casting doubt on Musk's real objectives. Headlines like, "Is Elon Musk's vision really about the planet or just about power?" and "The dark side of Musk's sustainable future" made their way into the public consciousness. The narratives were carefully designed to undermine the trust the public had started to build in Musk and his mission. At the same time, certain political figures began to distance themselves from the Musk-Green alliance. Senators and representatives who had previously expressed support now publicly backed away, citing concerns about Musk's handling of sensitive government contracts or to the risks of relying too heavily on a single billionaire to solve systemic issues. The shift was calculated and coordinated, a clear message that the opposition was preparing to exploit any vulnerability they could find. But Musk wasn't the kind of man to stand by and let the winds of public opinion shift without a fight. He gathered his closest advisors, including Claire and Alex, in a high-level strategy meeting. "We've known this was coming," Elon said, his voice calm but filled with intensity. "This is the big play. They're trying to break us down by creating doubt, but we can't let them. The facts are on our side, and we need to double down on transparency." Claire nodded in agreement. "We need to go on the offense again. We can't let them control the narrative. We've got the truth on our side, and we need to make sure everyone knows it." Alex leaned forward. "There's a danger, though. The negative campaigns have already been planted. There's no easy way to undo the damage they've done in the media, but we do have a way to push back, if we hit them where it hurts." Elon raised an eyebrow. "What are you thinking?" Alex's eyes glinted with a mix of determination and strategy. "We fight fire with fire. We make sure the people behind these attacks are exposed just like we did before. But this time, we go after the financial backing. If we can show that these smear campaigns are funded by the very corporate interests Musk is fighting against, we'll shift the narrative entirely." Elon's expression softened, the spark of realization lighting up his face. "I like it. We need to hit them in their wallets. If we can expose their financial ties to this orchestrated campaign, we'll show the public that they're not just fighting against me. They're fighting against progress itself." Elon and his team quickly mobilized, using the same methods that had worked for them in the past: leaking documents, pressuring insiders, and digging into public financial records. The goal was clear. If the opposition had hidden their connections behind layers of corporate and political shields, Musk was going to expose them to the world. Meanwhile, the public was beginning to feel the weight of the battle. Social media was flooded with debates and discussions about Musk's credibility, with people on both sides passionately defending or attacking him. But Musk knew that the most significant part of the fight wasn't happening online. It was happening behind closed doors, in boardrooms and political offices where decisions about his future were being made. In the weeks that followed, the counterattack continued to escalate. Negative ads became more frequent, but Musk's team was ready. The battle for the public's trust was a war of attrition, and each side was pushing harder and harder to win the hearts and minds of the people. But through it all, Musk remained steadfast. He knew that winning the battle in the media was only half the fight. He needed to keep pushing forward with his vision, keeping his focus on the bigger picture. Then, as if on cue, another breakthrough occurred. This time, a financial leak tied directly to the corporate interests backing the smear campaign was uncovered. The documents revealed clear evidence of large-scale donations from the same companies Musk had been challenging, funneled through political PACs and media consultants, all aimed at discrediting Musk's initiatives. It was the final piece of the puzzle. With this new evidence in hand, Musk and Green went public again, this time with a sharper, more aggressive strategy. They exposed the financial corruption behind the smear campaigns, drawing direct lines between the interests trying to destroy Musk's vision and the industries that had the most to lose. This was no longer just about one man's fight against a system. It was about an entire movement to push back against a power structure that had long operated in the shadows. The truth had once again been revealed, but the battle was far from over. With the revelation of the financial ties backing the smear campaign, Elon Musk had struck a powerful blow. The world now knew that the attacks on him weren't just about politics. They were part of a larger effort by powerful corporate entities trying to protect their interests. Musk had done what many believed was impossible. He had turned the tide, pulling the curtain back on the hidden forces working against him. But while the public took notice, the opposition wasn't backing down. If anything, they were doubling their efforts. The stakes were higher than ever. Elon sat in a high-rise conference room at SpaceX headquarters, looking out over the sprawling cityscape below. The weight of the battle had begun to settle in. The tension was palpable. His team, Claire, Alex, and Senator Green, had been working tirelessly to keep the momentum going, but they knew the real work was about to begin. The corporate and political forces Musk had exposed weren't going to go quietly. "I've been thinking," Elon said, turning toward his team. "We've revealed the truth about the financial connections behind the smear campaign, but they've already started attacking us again. They'll keep pushing these narratives until they've worn us down." Claire's voice was steady, but there was a concern that lingered in her eyes. "It's only going to get more aggressive from here. But we can't let them control the story. We need to amplify our own message." Alex nodded. "We need to strike at the heart of this. We need to go after their credibility. We've already shown how they've manipulated the system, but we need to expose the entire network they've built to protect their interests." Musk's brow furrowed as he considered the gravity of the situation. It's a war, and wars are won not just by fighting hard, but by controlling the narrative. "I'm going to give them a taste of their own medicine." The next few days were a blur of strategy meetings, late-night phone calls, and detailed briefings. Elon knew that exposing the corruption was only part of the equation. He needed to find a way to destabilize his opponents even further, to reveal how deep their entanglement with power and money really went. They had relied on secrecy and manipulation to maintain control, but Musk had one key advantage: transparency. His team worked relentlessly, digging through public records, lobbying efforts, and campaign finance reports. They uncovered further evidence of collusion between the highest levels of government and the corporate forces Musk had already exposed. But this time, they found something that could change the game. Evidence that some of the very senators and politicians who had turned against Musk were receiving funding from the same companies that had backed the smear campaign. This was no coincidence. Elon's voice echoed with resolve as he spoke to his team once the new information came to light. "We've got them. This is it. If we can expose the direct ties between these politicians and the corporations that stand to lose from my projects, we can make it clear to the public just how deep the corruption runs." With the new information in hand, the strategy shifted. This wasn't just about fighting misinformation anymore. It was about exposing the political system for what it was: a system controlled by corporate interests that had no problem sacrificing the future of the planet to protect their own profits. Elon knew the power of the media, and now he was going to use it to his advantage. His team reached out to a network of investigative journalists who had been following the story closely. They worked around the clock to piece together the financial donations, lobbying activities, and secret meetings between corporate execs and politicians. It wasn't just the financial backing that mattered. It was the influence these powerful figures had used to shape policies that served their interests at the expense of the public good. In the midst of this, Elon decided to take a bold step. He would go public with the full extent of the findings in a televised address. He would lay bare the details of the corruption, the collusion, and the manipulation. This wasn't just a battle for his future. It was a battle for the future of the nation. The day of the address arrived, and the tension in the air was palpable. Cameras flashed as Musk stood in front of a podium at a press conference, flanked by Claire, Alex, and Senator Green. Behind him, a giant screen displayed charts, graphs, and documents, proof of the deep-seated corruption he was about to expose. "Elon," a reporter called out from the crowd, "do you really think people will believe this?" It's one thing to accuse someone of corruption, but it's another to prove it. How can you be sure this will turn the tide in your favor? Elon stood tall, his voice steady but full of conviction. What I'm about to show you isn't speculation. It's fact. The same companies and politicians who claim to be fighting for the greater good have been working together in the shadows to maintain the status quo. They don't care about sustainability, and they don't care about innovation. They care about their bottom lines. He paused as the screen behind him shifted to a detailed timeline of donations, meetings, and lobbying efforts. Everything connected back to a few key corporate players who had everything to lose if Musk's ventures succeeded. This is the truth. And now it's up to the people to decide what kind of future they want. The effect was immediate. The broadcast spread across news outlets, social media platforms, and political forums. The public couldn't ignore the facts laid out before them. The media, which had once been quick to attack Musk, found itself on the back foot, scrambling to process the information. Some outlets tried to discredit the findings, but many others confirmed the legitimacy of the evidence. For the first time in weeks, Musk felt a surge of hope. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place. The truth was out, and it was undeniable. But as the wave of public support began to build, so did the response from his adversaries. The battle was far from over. In fact, it was only heating up. Back in Washington, the political figures Musk had exposed were scrambling. They had underestimated him, just as many had done before. Senator Victoria Hayes, who had been at the center of much of the opposition's efforts, held a closed-door meeting with several of her colleagues. Their faces were grim as they reviewed the latest developments. "We can't let this stand," Hayes said, her voice sharp. "If we don't act fast, we lose everything." One of her colleagues, a seasoned senator with ties to major corporate backers, leaned forward. "We can't afford to have this mess upend the whole system. We'll need to discredit Musk, and we'll need to do it fast." The tension between the two sides was palpable, each side maneuvering to outplay the other. But as much as the opposition plotted, they were on the defensive now, playing catch-up to a man they had once underestimated. The war for control was at its peak. The question now was not who would win the battle for public opinion, but who would have the stamina to outlast the other side. Elon Musk had gained ground, but the opposition wasn't done. The stakes had never been higher. The days following Elon Musk's televised address were a blur. The public had erupted into an intense debate. On one side, there was a growing wave of support from people who believed Musk had exposed the deep corruption within the system. On the other, the opposition was rallying behind a new strategy, one that had been prepared in the wings for months. Musk had shown his cards, but now his adversaries were ready to counter with everything they had. Elon had never been one to bask in victory. The moment of reflection, however, had arrived. With his team gathered around a large conference table, they were reviewing everything that had happened so far. The battle had taken a personal toll on all of them, and the pressure to continue pushing forward was weighing heavily. But there was no time to rest. Elon sat at the head of the table, his fingers steepled together as he looked at the faces around him. Claire, Alex, Senator Green, and the rest of the team were all present, their expressions serious. "Everyone is asking me what the next move is," Elon said, breaking the silence. "They're waiting for us to make a misstep, to reveal a weakness. But right now, we've got to stay calm. We know how high the stakes are." Claire looked up from her tablet. "We've put the truth out there, but the opposition isn't giving up. They're already launching a counteroffensive, subtle tactics, making Musk look like a puppet master instead of someone genuinely fighting for change." Alex chimed in. "There's more. They're trying to paint you as a destabilizing force. They want to show that your ambition is selfish, that you're putting the world at risk with your projects." Elon's gaze hardened. "That's their angle, then? Let's see how far they get. They've underestimated us before. Let's keep pushing. People deserve the truth." The room fell silent, as everyone understood the gravity of the situation. They'd gone from reacting to the opposition's attacks to orchestrating their own counteractions. But now, the next move would have to be more calculated. They were on the verge of something bigger than just another media campaign or financial revelation. For the next few days, the atmosphere in Musk's team was one of intense focus. Behind closed doors, they scrutinized every piece of information, every move made by the opposition. They were no longer just fighting a battle for public opinion. They were fighting to keep their momentum alive. The backlash had started, and Musk knew that the enemy wouldn't give up easily. As the sun set one evening, Elon stood by the window of his private office, gazing out at the horizon. He thought back to the countless sleepless nights and endless battles, both in the public eye and behind the scenes. It felt as though the pressure was mounting, but he had been here before. He knew how to endure. He had faced resistance all his life. Now, the future of the world was at stake, and this was a challenge he couldn't back away from. Elon, a voice from the doorway broke his train of thought. It was Claire. We've got something interesting. The opposition is making moves again. They're planning something major. Musk turned. His interest peaked. What do you mean? Claire stepped into the room, holding a file in her hand. They've been quietly building up a new narrative, one that takes everything we've exposed about them and flips it. They're going to try to paint you as a man who can't be trusted with the future. They're digging into your past, old contracts, interviews, anything they can use to show that you've been making questionable decisions for years. Elon's jaw clenched. They want to discredit me completely. If they can make people doubt my character, they can neutralize everything we've fought for. Exactly, Claire replied. They've already been working with a few key media outlets, planting stories that are going to come out in the next week. We need to be ready for it. Musk ran a hand through his hair. I should have known. They'll try anything to distract from the truth. We can't let them control the narrative anymore. The team quickly regrouped to formulate a plan. Elon had always been known for his unpredictable moves and bold decisions, and this time would be no different. They couldn't fight the opposition on their terms. They had to outsmart them. We're not just going to respond to their attacks, Elon said, his voice steady. We're going to shift the focus. Instead of playing defense, we're going on the offense. We'll expose the very system they're trying to protect. We're going to take control of the narrative. Alex nodded in agreement. The media's already going to be filled with these smear pieces, so we need to hijack the conversation. We need to make sure people know that the real issue is the corruption and greed that has been holding progress back for decades. Elon looked at his team. We've got the truth on our side. We need to make sure it's heard louder than any of their lies. As they finalized their plan, Elon couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. Every decision, every move was crucial. This wasn't just about winning a media battle. It was about the future of the world. Musk wasn't just fighting for his own legacy. He was fighting for the planet's future. He knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but he had always believed in pushing the boundaries, breaking through the limits that others set. This was no different. In the weeks that followed, the opposition intensified their attacks, but Musk's team was ready. They worked tirelessly to uncover more evidence, to further expose the corrupt system that was trying to stop progress. But Elon was strategic. He didn't just wait for the next blow. He created the narrative. The following week, just as the media was gearing up to release another round of negative stories about Musk, he made his move. Through a live-streamed address, Musk presented a comprehensive report on the true cost of the current political and corporate systems. He laid out the facts, the connections between the highest levels of government and the corporate entities that had stood in the way of real progress for decades. This isn't about me, Musk said, his voice strong but calm. This is about all of us. This is about the future of humanity. The people who are fighting against this change have had their chance. They've had their power. But it's time for a new era, one that doesn't rely on greed, manipulation, and control. The response was immediate. Social media exploded, with people from all walks of life rallying behind Musk's message. The narrative had shifted. Instead of Musk being the villain, the focus was now on the systems that had tried to suppress him and his vision. The tide was turning, but Musk knew that this was just the beginning. The opposition wasn't done. They would fight harder now, but he was ready. The battle had reached a tipping point. After Elon Musk's bold televised address, the public response was nothing short of explosive. The media landscape had shifted dramatically. Musk, once the target of relentless attacks, had turned the tables, positioning himself as a beacon of transparency, innovation, and honesty in a sea of corruption. But beneath the surface of this apparent victory, a quiet storm was brewing. His opponents weren't going to let him win so easily. They were regrouping in the shadows, preparing their next moves. Elon knew that the war wasn't over, not by a long shot. The first wave of attacks had failed to achieve their goal of discrediting him, but he couldn't afford to get complacent. This wasn't just about winning the media cycle. It was about dismantling a system that had been built over decades, a system that wielded power like a weapon. Musk had exposed the first cracks, but now the true battle was unfolding behind the scenes. Elon sat alone in his office, the weight of the decision weighing heavily on his shoulders. He had built a reputation over the years for being an unpredictable visionary, someone who didn't follow the rules. But now, more than ever, the stakes were personal. He wasn't just fighting for his legacy or for SpaceX and Tesla. He was fighting for the future, and he knew the forces lined up against him would stop at nothing to protect their interests. As his team gathered to discuss the next steps, Elon could sense the shift in the air. There was a quiet urgency now. They had been playing defense for too long. It was time to go on the offense, and this time, they would go deeper than ever before. "We've done everything by the book so far," Claire said, her voice steady as always. "But we need to get ahead of them. We need to expose more than just the corruption. We need to expose the systems, the networks that have been protecting these corporations for so long." Elon nodded thoughtfully. "They're not just after me. They're after everything I represent. The status quo is at risk, and they'll use every tool in the book to stop me. It's not just about buying media coverage anymore. They'll start using their influence in the courts, the government, anywhere they can." Alex, who had been quiet for a moment, finally spoke up. "We've been gathering intel. There's something we need to look into. The financial system that backs the smear campaigns, the corporate interests, they don't operate in isolation. They're part of a larger network. If we can expose the key players who are pulling the strings behind the scenes, we can take down their entire infrastructure." Musk's eyes gleamed with understanding. "You're talking about the people who fund everything, the ones behind the curtain. If we can expose them, we don't just take down the campaign against me. We destroy their ability to control the system." The team dove into the research, digging deeper into the financial underpinnings of the opposition. They began to uncover connections that went far beyond the surface. The same corporations that had funded the smear campaign against Musk were also linked to a sprawling network of political action committees, PACs, lobbyists, and shadow organizations designed to influence policy on a massive scale. But there was one key player that kept coming up. Someone who had managed to stay hidden in the background, manipulating the game without ever revealing themselves. This person was deeply entrenched in both the corporate world and the political arena. They had the power to influence decisions, to pull strings that could make or break the biggest players in the system. "Elon," Claire said one evening, after hours of research, "I think we've found the person at the center of it all. This isn't just about business interests or political power. This person has managed to stay in the shadows for decades, but they've funded and backed every major player involved in the opposition against you." Elon leaned forward, intrigued. "Who is it?" Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Richard Caldwell, the CEO of Titan Enterprises. He's a major player in global finance, and his company has its hands in just about every sector you can think of. But what's more concerning is his political influence. Caldwell has been quietly funding politicians, think tanks, and lobbying firms for years, all while keeping his name out of the public eye." Elon's mind raced. Richard Caldwell was a name he had heard in passing, but he never imagined that someone like him could be pulling the strings in such a vast, unseen network. If Caldwell was really at the center of everything, this was no longer just a political or media battle. It was a war against one of the most powerful men in the world. The following days were a whirlwind of strategy sessions, covert meetings, and intensive research. Elon knew that exposing Caldwell would be the key to breaking the opposition. But Caldwell was no ordinary foe. He was a master of staying hidden in the shadows, operating behind layers of influence that would make any direct attack dangerous. "We need a way to bring him into the light," Musk said to his team. "Caldwell can't stay anonymous anymore. If we expose him for what he is, the entire system starts to crumble." The team began looking into Caldwell's financial dealings, his political donations, and any potential scandals that might expose him. The deeper they dug, the more unsettling it became. Caldwell's reach seemed to extend into every corner of the world, from the highest echelons of government to the farthest reaches of corporate finance. But they couldn't afford to be intimidated. This was the fight of their lives. Meanwhile, in the quiet halls of Titan Enterprises, Richard Caldwell sat in his private office, overlooking the skyline of the city. He had been aware of Elon Musk for years, but only recently had he begun to realize just how much of a threat Musk posed to the system he had worked so hard to build. Musk's transparency, his refusal to play by the rules, was exactly what Caldwell had feared. It was a destabilizing force that could unravel everything. The report on Musk's latest moves had reached Caldwell's desk. He wasn't surprised by Musk's boldness, but he was concerned by how much traction the public was giving him. The media had been eating up Musk's exposé, and Caldwell's own allies were beginning to feel the heat. He picked up the phone and dialed a number. "It's time we had a talk," he said, his voice cold. "Prepare for the next phase. We need to shut this down before it gets out of hand." Back in Musk's camp, the team was preparing their final push. They had gathered the evidence. Now it was time to go public. Elon Musk wasn't just going to expose the corruption anymore. He was going to expose the man behind it all. Elon's voice was steady but resolute as he addressed his team. "We've been fighting a battle for months, but we're about to take the fight to the very people who have been controlling the narrative. We're going to bring Richard Caldwell into the light, and we're going to show the world exactly how deep this corruption runs. When this is over, it won't just be my name cleared. It will be the beginning of the end for the system that has been holding us back." With a single, calculated move, Elon Musk was about to expose the shadowy figure who had been orchestrating the attacks against him. The world was about to see just how far the tentacles of power stretched, and how one man was willing to tear it all down to change the future. The moment Elon Musk had been waiting for had finally arrived. The plan to expose Richard Caldwell and his network was in motion, and every piece of the puzzle was falling into place. His team had gathered enough evidence, and now it was time to take the gloves off. The media, the public, and even Caldwell himself were about to be confronted with a truth so undeniable that they could no longer ignore it. Elon stood in front of a large screen in the conference room, the faces of his team illuminated by the glow of the data. Claire, Alex, Senator Green, and the others were all present, their eyes fixed on the screen, which displayed a timeline of Caldwell's operations, his political donations, financial backdoor deals, and his hidden connections to corporations that had funded the campaign to bring Musk down. "We've got him," Elon said, his voice firm. "This is it. We've exposed the man behind it all. Now, it's time to make sure the world knows what he's done." Claire leaned forward, her expression resolute. "This isn't just about us anymore, Elon. If we go public with this, we're not just bringing down a man. We're taking on an entire system. The way they've controlled everything for so long, the corruption, the greed, it's all tied to him." Alex nodded. "And we've got the proof. We've cross-referenced every financial transaction, every shady deal, and every connection. This isn't hearsay, it's concrete. There's no way Caldwell can talk his way out of this." Senator Green, ever the pragmatist, interjected. "We need to be careful with the timing. Caldwell has powerful allies in Washington, and if we're too quick to release everything, they could bury this. We need to ensure that the public is already on our side before we drop the bombshell." Elon took a deep breath. "You're right. The timing is everything. We need to keep the pressure on him, but we also need to build momentum. If we go public now, it could give him the chance to frame it as a smear campaign. But if we wait too long, we risk losing our advantage." There was a moment of silence as the team absorbed the gravity of the situation. Elon's eyes moved from face to face, and he could see the weight of the decision in each of them. This wasn't just a political move, it was a fight for the future. That night, as Elon sat alone in his office, he reflected on everything that had led him here. The sleepless nights, the strategic moves, the personal cost of everything he had put on the line. But despite the exhaustion, there was a sense of resolve in him. He had known the risks from the beginning. He had understood that going up against people like Caldwell wouldn't be easy. But this was more than just a fight for his own survival. It was a fight for the world's future, and he wasn't going to let it slip away. He picked up his phone and dialed a number. "Get me everything you can on Caldwell's offshore accounts," he said when the voice on the other end picked up. "I need every piece of dirt we can find. If we're doing this, We're doing it right. The following morning, the team was ready. They had the evidence, they had the narrative, and now it was time to strike. Elon was scheduled to make a live appearance on a major news network, and it would be during this broadcast that they would reveal the full scope of Caldwell's operations to the world. As the cameras started rolling, Elon stood behind the podium, looking calm and collected, but his mind was laser-focused on the task at hand. The world was about to see the man who had been pulling the strings from the shadows. "Good evening," Elon began, his voice strong. "What I'm about to reveal is something that we can no longer ignore. For far too long, the people in power have operated in the shadows, manipulating the system for their own gain, while the rest of us, those who truly believe in progress, are left to fight for change." The camera zoomed in on his face, and for a moment, the weight of his words seemed to settle over the room. "I've spent my career building companies that challenge the status quo, that push the boundaries of what's possible," he continued. "But what I've come to realize is that there are forces at play far greater than any one company or individual. These forces have been controlling the narrative, steering the course of global policy, and hiding behind a veil of corporate influence. The man who has been orchestrating this manipulation, the one who has been funding the attacks against me and countless others like me, is none other than Richard Caldwell, the CEO of Titan Enterprises." A ripple of gasps could be heard from the audience in the studio. Musk's words were bold, but they were just the beginning. The screen behind him lit up with an intricate web of financial transactions, documents, and timelines that traced Caldwell's influence across multiple industries and political circles. There were connections to lobbyists, to government officials, and to corporate giants, each one carefully concealed, until now. "This," Musk continued, "is not just about one man's greed. This is about a system that has used its influence to suppress innovation, to crush anyone who threatens their control. And today, we're shining a light on that system." He paused, letting the weight of the information sink in. "This is the truth, plain and simple. The people who have been standing in our way are not just businessmen. They are gatekeepers of a broken system. And it's time for that system to fall." As the broadcast ended, the response was immediate. Social media erupted with activity. News outlets picked up the story, and before long, Caldwell's name was trending worldwide. The evidence that Elon had presented was irrefutable. Caldwell, the man who had operated in the shadows for so long, was now exposed to the world. But Elon knew this was only the beginning. The opposition wouldn't sit idly by, they would retaliate. The fight was far from over. In fact, it had just entered a new phase. That night, as Elon watched the news coverage, his phone buzzed. It was a text message from Claire. "They're coming for us. Get ready." Elon's heart sank as he read the message. The system that had protected Caldwell for so long wouldn't go down without a fight. And now, Elon Musk had officially declared war, not just on one man, but on an entire network of power and corruption. Elon Musk had known that exposing Richard Caldwell would not be without its consequences. But even he hadn't anticipated the full scale of the retaliation. The moment Caldwell's name had been dragged into the light, a quiet but intense storm began to stir. Powerful figures in the corporate and political world started moving behind the scenes, preparing their own counterstrike. Musk's boldness had cracked the facade of the system, but now, the system was responding, forcefully, and with a speed that took even him by surprise. The night after the broadcast, Elon and his team gathered in a secure location to plan their next move. Tensions were high. The team had expected pushback, but the level of intensity was unlike anything they had encountered before. Caldwell's allies were not just trying to suppress the information. They were coming after Musk with everything they had. "We knew this was coming," Claire said, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "But this is bigger than we thought. There are already smear campaigns starting against us. The media's painting us as conspiracy theorists, as if the evidence we've shown means nothing." Elon paced around the room, his mind racing. "We've taken the first step, but now we need to control the narrative. Caldwell and his people are using their connections in the media and government to discredit us. They're playing the long game, and we need to outsmart them." Alex spoke up, his voice tense with urgency. "It's not just the media. The financial markets are starting to react too. There's been a sudden dip in some of our stocks, and the Tesla board is getting calls from investors, pressuring them to distance themselves from you. Elon stopped in his tracks. I'm not backing down. We can't let them turn this into a financial attack. That's exactly what they want, to weaken us economically. We've always known they'd try to leverage our businesses against us. The counterattack came in waves. Caldwell's allies launched a full-scale public relations campaign designed to discredit Musk and his team, painting them as desperate and reckless. They flooded social media with paid advertisements and false stories, portraying Elon as a paranoid businessman who had lost touch with reality. The press picked up these narratives, amplifying the story with sensational headlines that cast doubt on Musk's integrity and motives. In addition to the media smear campaign, political figures that Caldwell had backed began calling for investigations into Musk's business practices. Unfounded accusations about tax evasion, environmental violations, and even corporate espionage began to surface. Elon could feel the pressure mounting. It wasn't just about defending his reputation anymore. It was about protecting the future of everything he had built. But it wasn't just the media and politics that Musk had to worry about. Caldwell's reach extended into the financial markets, and his allies in the corporate world were using their influence to shake the foundation of SpaceX and Tesla. Elon's board members began to feel the heat, with several of them privately questioning whether continuing to support Musk was in their best financial interest. The pressure was mounting on all fronts, and it seemed like the walls were closing in. But Elon wasn't the type to back down. He had been through countless obstacles before, and each time, he had found a way to push through. This was no different. I didn't come this far just to roll over and play their game, Musk said, determination in his voice. We've been playing defense long enough. It's time to strike back, but this time, we do it differently. The team began formulating a plan of their own, one that would counter Caldwell's influence at every turn. They knew they needed to take control of the narrative once again. They had the truth on their side, but it was no longer enough to just expose Caldwell. They needed to turn the public against him, to show them who he really was. We need to hit him where it hurts, Claire said. The people who've been backing him, politicians, corporate execs, all of them, they need to know we're not afraid to go after them. If we can expose their connections to Caldwell, we'll create a ripple effect that'll be hard to ignore. Elon nodded. Exactly. We need to go after his entire network. If we can link him directly to the corruption we've been exposing, it'll be game over. Alex added, and we can't just rely on traditional media anymore. We need to take this directly to the people. Social media, independent journalism, anything we can use to bypass the filters that Caldwell's allies are controlling. The public needs to see the full picture. The team got to work, gathering more evidence of Caldwell's connections to politicians, business tycoons, and influential media figures. They launched a social media campaign to get the word out, making sure to highlight the inconsistencies in Caldwell's public image and link him directly to the corrupt practices they had uncovered. Independent journalists, bloggers, and whistleblowers began to take notice, amplifying the story in ways that traditional outlets had ignored or suppressed. As the media landscape began to shift, Caldwell's allies scrambled to regain control. But it was too late. The public was already engaged. People who had previously been skeptical of Musk's motivations now saw him as a truth-teller, someone who was willing to stand up against the forces that had been pulling the strings for far too long. Despite the growing support from the public, the battle was far from over. Caldwell's network was vast, and he wasn't going down without a fight. As the days went on, the attacks became more personal. Musk's family, his friends, and even his employees were targeted in an effort to pressure him into backing down. But Elon's resolve only hardened. Late one night, Elon sat in his office, looking out over the city. The fight was far from over, but he was no longer just reacting to the moves of his enemies. He had taken the fight to them, and now he was prepared for whatever came next. As the glow of his computer screen illuminated his face, a message popped up on his inbox. It was from Claire. They're starting to crack. We've got more whistleblowers coming forward. It's only a matter of time before the tide turns in our favor. Elon's heart quickened. This was it. The endgame had begun. The pressure, the threats, the attacks, they had all been part of the plan. Now, it was time to finish what they had started. We've got them, Elon muttered to himself, his voice tinged with determination. And this time, they won't escape. The momentum was building, and the tide of the battle was beginning to shift in Elon Musk's favor. His team had done what many had considered impossible. They had taken on the most powerful and corrupt network of corporate and political elites, and now their pushback was gaining ground. The more they exposed Caldwell's web of lies and manipulation, the more cracks appeared in his carefully constructed empire. However, the war was far from over. Caldwell's allies, those who had once operated in the shadows, were desperate to maintain control. As Musk's revelations started to snowball, their retaliation escalated. The media war had intensified, with TV anchors, reporters, and online influencers who had once been quiet now turning their sights on Elon and his team. They didn't just want to discredit them, they wanted to bury them. But Musk knew that the public was starting to see through the smokescreen. The truth had a way of revealing itself, no matter how hard they tried to cover it up. It was early morning when Elon received a call that would prove to be the turning point. His phone buzzed insistently on the desk, and when he saw the name on the screen, his stomach churned with both anticipation and apprehension. It was from Claire. "Elon, we've got a lead," she said, her voice urgent but composed. "A whistleblower, one of Caldwell's own people, is ready to come forward with everything he knows. He has direct evidence that ties Caldwell to some of the most egregious illegal activities we've uncovered, and more." Elon's heart skipped a beat. This was it, the breakthrough they had been waiting for. "What kind of evidence are we talking about?" he asked, leaning forward in his chair, his mind racing. "He's got a recorded conversation between Caldwell and several high-profile politicians. It's all about orchestrating financial scandals, manipulating stock prices, and securing influence over government policy. If this comes out, it's game over." "Where is he now?" Elon asked, already standing up, his fingers running through his hair. Claire paused. "He's at a safe location. We're bringing him in for a secure meeting tomorrow. It's crucial we handle this carefully." Elon nodded. "Let's move quickly. We can't afford to let Caldwell get wind of this before we're ready to act." The next day, Elon and his team gathered in a secure location. A room had been set up with the necessary precautions, encrypted communication lines, security personnel, and surveillance to ensure that nothing was leaked prematurely. The whistleblower, a former Titan Enterprises employee named Jason Michaels, had agreed to meet them face-to-face, with the promise of full protection. Jason was nervous when he walked into the room. His eyes darted around, taking in the heavy security, the seriousness in everyone's demeanor. He wasn't used to being in a situation like this. He had been a mid-level manager at Titan Enterprises before he discovered the corruption, the lies, and the manipulation. He had been one of the many who were kept in the dark, until one day, he stumbled upon documents and emails that changed everything. "I'm in way over my head here," Jason said, his voice trembling slightly, "but I can't let this go on any longer. What Caldwell and his people are doing, it's criminal. And I have the proof. I have recordings, financial transactions, confidential memos, everything." Elon looked at him closely. "Jason, you're doing the right thing. This isn't just about us. It's about stopping a system that's been rigging the game for far too long. We'll protect you. Just tell us everything you have." Jason hesitated for a moment before pulling out a flash drive. "These are the recordings, the emails, everything I've gathered over the last few months. But I need you to understand, Caldwell has eyes everywhere. He'll know I'm the one who gave you this. And when he finds out, there's no telling what he'll do." Elon took the flash drive, his mind already working out the next steps. "We'll make sure you're safe, Jason. The information you have is priceless. We'll make it count." Within hours, the team had decrypted the files. The recordings were damning. They captured Caldwell's voice, calm and calculated, making deals with government officials, manipulating markets, and securing his network of power. These weren't just casual conversations. They were detailed plans to control entire industries, manipulate legislation, and profit off the suffering of others. It was a level of corruption that Musk had only suspected, but now he had irrefutable proof. The team worked tirelessly, cross-referencing the evidence with what they had already uncovered. The deeper they dug, the more they found. Caldwell's influence spread like a cancer through the financial and political systems. There were names, high-profile senators, CEOs of major corporations, and influential lobbyists implicated in his web of lies. It was more than just a few bad actors. It was a global network of corruption that had been operating with impunity for years. Elon knew that releasing this information would be explosive. It would shake the foundations of the entire system. The public would demand accountability, and those in power would have no choice but to respond. But there was also the risk that Caldwell's allies would fight back harder than ever before. As the hours passed, the decision was clear. They needed to release the information, but they had to be strategic. If they went public too quickly, Caldwell's allies might be able to spin the story and discredit them. But if they waited too long, the moment could pass, and they might lose the momentum they had built. It was time to strike again, but this time, they would do it on their terms. Elon gathered his team in the war room once more. "This is it," he said, his voice steely. "We've been playing defense long enough. Now we take the fight to them." Claire nodded, already pulling up the media contacts and social media platforms that would be key in spreading the information. "I've got a plan. We'll release the story through multiple channels at once. An exclusive interview with one of the whistleblowers, followed by a live-streamed presentation of the evidence. We'll get ahead of Caldwell's people before they can spin it." Alex added, "We also need to push back against the media narratives. They've been trying to paint us as the bad guys for too long. It's time to flip the script and put Caldwell on the defensive." Elon took a deep breath. "We've come this far, and there's no turning back now. Let's make it count." The following morning, the world was rocked. A live-streamed broadcast showed Elon Musk unveiling the evidence, first the recordings, then the documents, and finally, a live interview with Jason Michaels, the whistleblower. As the footage rolled, Musk spoke directly to the camera. "This is the truth," he said, his voice unwavering. "This is the reality of the world we've been living in. A world where power is bought and sold, where corruption is allowed to thrive, and where the people suffer while the elite play their games." The broadcast went viral within minutes. News outlets, social media platforms, and independent journalists picked up the story. For the first time, Caldwell's web of lies was exposed in its entirety. The truth was out, and there was no hiding from it. But Elon knew this was only the beginning. The backlash would be fierce, and Caldwell's network wasn't going to give up without a fight. As the world reacted to the revelations, Musk couldn't help but wonder, what would be the next move in this high-stakes game? And who would fall next? The truth had been revealed, but the consequences of it were just beginning. The floodgates had opened, and Caldwell's empire was crumbling. But with every piece of evidence that exposed his corruption, the retaliation grew more intense. Elon Musk and his team were now in the eye of a storm that had been years in the making. A battle that could reshape the political and corporate landscapes forever. Within hours of Musk's live stream, Caldwell's allies went on the offensive, trying to discredit the evidence and divert attention from the damning revelations. Corporate media outlets, still under Caldwell's influence, worked overtime to create doubt, attempting to label the whistleblower, Jason Michaels, as a disgruntled former employee, while dismissing the recordings as doctored or misleading. Some of the political figures connected to Caldwell started launching counter-narratives, denying their involvement and calling for investigations into Musk's business dealings instead. They were attempting to shift the focus, painting Musk as the aggressor rather than the truth-bearer. But the damage had already been done. The narrative had shifted. The public was now fully engaged, and the truth was out there for all to see. People across the world were waking up to the scale of the corruption that had been hiding in plain sight, and there was a growing sense of outrage. The mainstream media might have been trying to suppress the truth, but independent outlets, social media platforms, and whistleblowers were not going to let that happen. Elon Musk knew that the fight wasn't over. Exposing Caldwell's corruption was just one step, and now they had to fight the hardest battle of all, the battle for public opinion. The media was still pushing back, and Caldwell's allies in government and business weren't backing down. But Elon had learned long ago that when the odds were stacked against him, he didn't retreat. He adapted. And this time, he had the people on his side. In a meeting with his core team, Elon's tone was firm but focused. "We've shaken the foundation, but now we need to finish what we started. They're going to throw everything they have at us. Smears, lies, political pressure. But we have one thing they don't have, the truth. And the people know it. Claire, ever the strategist, nodded. The story's out there, but we need to keep the pressure on. We can't let up. We've been taking the fight to them, but we need to go further. We need to push for accountability. The people want justice, and they want it now. We need to make sure that Caldwell doesn't get away with this, Alex added, determination in his voice. We need to hold the powerful accountable, no matter who they are or what they control. Elon rubbed his temples for a moment, his thoughts racing. I know, but Caldwell isn't just a man. He's a symbol of everything that's wrong with this system. If we take him down, we'll be taking down a whole network. But this is bigger than just him. It's about the system that allowed him to thrive. And if we want real change, we need to bring down that system too. The decision was made. They would push for widespread reforms. Elon Musk, having always operated on the belief that progress was the ultimate goal, now found himself in the middle of a larger fight. The evidence they had uncovered wasn't just about taking down one man. It was about changing the entire structure of power that had allowed people like Caldwell to operate unchecked. Musk knew that the only way to ensure real change was to fight for systemic reform. They would continue to expose the corruption at every level, pushing not only for Caldwell's arrest but for a broader reckoning that would lead to real accountability in politics, business, and media. Musk used his platform to demand transparency, calling for stricter regulations on lobbying, corporate donations, and media ownership. The stakes had grown higher than ever. It was no longer just about protecting his businesses or defending his name. It was about protecting the future of the system itself. As the battle intensified, Caldwell's allies began to fracture. Some of the political figures who had supported him began distancing themselves, realizing that they could not afford to be associated with such a high-profile scandal. The pressure was mounting on Caldwell, and the cracks in his network were becoming more apparent. But he wasn't giving up without a fight. Caldwell went into overdrive, working behind the scenes to manipulate the media, to launch counterattacks, and to try to discredit Musk and his team. Caldwell's reach had been vast, but so had the support Musk had gained. As more and more whistleblowers came forward with their stories, it became clear that the corruption was not just about one man. It was part of a broader system of exploitation and manipulation. Musk's message resonated with the people. Enough was enough. The corporate elites, the politicians, and the media moguls had been operating under the assumption that they were untouchable. But that illusion was shattering before their eyes. The pressure was mounting from all sides, and it wasn't just about media or financial attacks anymore. Musk and his team had to be constantly vigilant. There were threats to their safety, to the safety of their families, and even to their companies. Caldwell's people would stop at nothing to protect their interests. But Musk had never been one to back down. If anything, the stakes only made him more determined. As the days turned into weeks, the pressure reached its boiling point. The political and financial systems were in chaos. Protests broke out in several cities, with people demanding justice and accountability. The stock market had taken a hit, with many companies associated with Caldwell's network plummeting in value. But despite the chaos, Musk's companies, particularly Tesla and SpaceX, continued to thrive. Their supporters were loyal, and the demand for their products had never been higher. However, Elon knew that the final showdown was inevitable. Caldwell would not go down quietly, but neither would he. It was late one evening when the final blow was struck. Elon received an encrypted message from an unknown source. It was a video recording, a final piece of the puzzle. In it, Caldwell himself was seen in a private meeting with several high-ranking government officials, plotting the next phase of his scheme. The evidence was clear. Caldwell had been working to manipulate not only the markets but also the very foundation of the government. He had been working to solidify his control, to bend the system to his will. Elon knew what he had to do. With the final piece of the puzzle in his hands, he took to his social media platform once more. This time, the message was simple, direct, and final. The people deserve the truth, and we will not rest until justice is served. This is not just about one man. This is about all of us. The video went viral. The world was watching, and there was no turning back now. The stage was set for the final confrontation. The world was holding its breath. Would Caldwell finally face justice, or would the corrupt system win yet again? The days that followed Elon Musk's final broadcast were a whirlwind. Caldwell's network, which had once seemed so invincible, was collapsing under the weight of the evidence, public outcry, and the relentless push from Musk and his team. But as the walls closed in on the corrupt billionaire, the true nature of the battle began to shift. This was no longer just about exposing one man's lies. It was about what would come next, after the dust had settled. Elon knew that the path ahead was uncertain. The fight against corruption and corporate greed wasn't something that could be solved with a single victory, no matter how monumental it felt. But this moment, this final confrontation, was going to set the tone for everything that followed. In the wake of the explosive revelations, Caldwell's political and business alliances began to crumble. He had tried to hold on to power by leveraging his influence in the media and lobbying behind closed doors. But the evidence was undeniable, and the public's anger was palpable. Caldwell's empire was fracturing. His allies, those who had supported him through thick and thin, started to distance themselves, realizing that being associated with him was no longer a viable option. The backlash was too overwhelming. By now, Caldwell himself was a shadow of the man he had once been. His confidence, once so unshakable, had been replaced by desperation. As his supporters scattered and his deals unraveled, he found himself in a corner, one with nowhere to run. Elon, however, wasn't focused on Caldwell's fall alone. The real question now was what came next. What would the world look like after the corruption had been exposed? After all the damage had been done, and all the power structures had been shaken, what would the world build in its place? The government had already started to investigate Caldwell, and the pressure from both the public and the media was unrelenting. Caldwell was facing legal battles on multiple fronts: criminal investigations, civil suits, and government hearings. Musk's team had provided irrefutable evidence of his illegal activities: corruption, money laundering, market manipulation, and more. Caldwell's assets were frozen, and he was placed under investigation for his role in orchestrating several high-profile scandals. It was clear that he would face the consequences of his actions, and the days of his empire were numbered. But the focus of the media, the public, and even Musk's team was shifting. It wasn't enough to simply take Caldwell down. It was about what would happen next. The truth had been laid bare, but now there was a moral reckoning to be had. What would become of the system that had allowed Caldwell's rise to power? Elon had become an advocate for deeper systemic reform. The world was demanding accountability, and Elon's fight for justice wasn't just about exposing one person. It was about tackling the very institutions that allowed figures like Caldwell to thrive. The public demanded change, and Elon was ready to answer that call. Elon and his team began working with lawmakers, reformists, and activists to craft a new vision for the future. They pushed for new legislation to limit corporate lobbying, increase transparency in government dealings, and break up monopolistic corporations that stifled innovation and held the public hostage. They sought to create an environment where power could no longer be hoarded by the few, but shared among the many, and where accountability was no longer a choice but a requirement. The fight for accountability, however, was not without its challenges. Powerful corporations and political figures who had benefited from the system were not ready to relinquish their hold on power. Lobbyists worked overtime to thwart reform, and the media tried to spin the narrative in their favor, claiming that the new legislation would stifle business and hurt the economy. It became clear that the battle was far from over. But Musk wasn't backing down. He used his platforms and businesses to speak out, advocating for change and encouraging others to join the fight. People from all walks of life, activists, ordinary citizens, and other high-profile figures, rallied behind his cause. The movement for a new, transparent system was gaining steam, and with every new day, it became more clear that the battle was no longer just about one corrupt individual, but about the future of society as a whole. Then came the moment of reckoning. Caldwell, the man who had once been untouchable, stood trial. The courtroom was packed, the media was swarming, and the world was watching. Elon sat in the front row, his mind focused. This wasn't just about seeing a man like Caldwell held accountable. It was about symbolizing the larger fight for justice and reform. Every eye was on that courtroom, and what happened in that moment could determine the future of the political and economic systems around the world. Caldwell's defense team tried everything: legal maneuvers, character attacks, and even claims of being targeted by a witch hunt. But the evidence was overwhelming. The recordings, the documents, and the testimony from whistleblowers like Jason Michaels all painted a picture that was impossible to deny. Finally, the judge made the ruling. Caldwell was guilty on all counts. As the gavel slammed down, a wave of relief and disbelief swept through the room. It was the moment everyone had been waiting for, the moment when justice was finally served. Caldwell was sentenced to life in prison for his crimes. The crowd in the courtroom erupted in applause, while Musk remained calm, knowing that this victory was just one step in a much larger journey. But the story didn't end there. With Caldwell's downfall came an opportunity. The global push for reform grew even stronger, and a new generation of leaders and activists rose to take on the mantle of change. Elon Musk's role in the battle had been crucial, but he understood that the real work had just begun. The fight for a fairer, more transparent world was an ongoing process, and while Caldwell had fallen, the system that had enabled him would require constant vigilance. Elon continued to work with lawmakers and advocates for meaningful change. He pushed for new technological innovations that would empower individuals, ensure fairness, and prevent the concentration of power in the hands of the few. His vision for a more just world was unfolding, and while it was still a work in progress, the winds of change were undeniable. The world had witnessed a monumental shift, but this wasn't just the end of one story. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one where the fight for justice, transparency, and fairness would continue to unfold for generations to come. As Elon stood at the forefront of this movement, looking toward the future, he could feel the weight of the journey behind him and the promise of what was still to come. This was only the beginning. The battle is over, but the war for justice and reform is just starting. Stay with us as we continue to build a better future for all. And remember, the fight for what's right never ends. With these words, the final chapter was written, but the story was far from over. The world had changed. The system had been shaken, and a new world was on the horizon. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?